Chapter 628. Deep in the East Sea. There were no clouds in the sky and the surface of the sea was rippling. This place was deserted and there seemed to be no life. However, there was another world under the sea. Fish and prawns played on the shallow surface of the sea. Below the surface of the sea, there were aquatic creatures patrolling. Palaces made of crystal coral sat at the bottom of the sea. This was the dragon palace of the East Sea's white dragon race. At a certain moment, there was a subtle fluctuation in the sea above. Two figures slowly approached the dragon palace. Soon they were discovered by the aquatic creatures patrolling around the dragon palace. Two prawn soldiers swam over with weapons and shouted, "Who are you? How dare you approach the dragon palace?" Li Mu stopped in front of the dragon palace and looked at the two prawn soldiers. He said, "I'm a friend of the White Demon King. I'm here to find him. Please inform him." The two prawn soldiers looked at each other. One of them waved his hand and said, "What White Demon King? There is no White Demon King here. This is the Dragon Palace. Outsiders are not allowed to come close. Leave quickly or don't blame us for being rude." This was the East Sea Dragon Palace. After Heart Song and Heart Listening's mother revived, their family came here. Even if the White Demon King wasn't in the Dragon Palace, the two prawn soldiers shouldn't have such an attitude. Li Mu didn't waste time talking to the two prawns. He scanned with his divine perception and soon found the White Demon King's aura in a palace below. He didn't hide his aura. When he scanned with his divine perception, the White Demon King also found him. Li Mu sensed that the White Demon King was about to approach him in the palace when he was suddenly blocked by something. Li Mu's figure flashed and appeared above the palace. The palace was sealed by an array. The White Demon King and Li Mu looked at each other from the array and hurriedly said, "Why are you here? Leave quickly. This isn't a place you can trespass." The White Demon King's situation was clearly different from what Li Mu had imagined. Li Mu could tell at a glance that the array's function was to imprison. His face sank slightly as he asked, "What's going on? Where are Heart Song and Heart Listening?" The White Demon King said anxiously, "There's no time to talk about this. Hurry up and leave or it'll be too late." Before he could finish his sentence, a harsh voice came from one of the palaces. "Who dares to trespass into my East Sea Dragon Palace?" A white figure flew out from the palace heading straight for Li Mu. In the blink of an eye, the white light dissipated and a young man clad in silver armor appeared in front of Li Mu. The young man had horns on his forehead. He was a level 6 white dragon. Li Mu did not even look at him. He looked straight at the White Demon King and said, "I'll let you out first." After saying that, he raised his hand and pressed down on the palace below. Seeing that it was being ignored, the white dragon was furious and said in a deep voice, "How dare you, human? Don't be so arrogant." He quickly condensed two huge ice hammers in his hands and smashed them towards Li Mu's head. Li Mu pressed one hand against the array formation while his other hand slapped the white dragon. Boom! Under his palm, the formation that enveloped the palace didn't even last a breath before it collapsed. Bang! At the same time, the silver-armored young man's giant hammer also shattered. The white dragon felt a terrifying aura lock onto him and was choked without any resistance. His eyes were wide open, filled with shock and fear. This was the deepest part of the East Sea. Less than 10% of human cultivators remained here. With his level 6 dragon cultivation, he didn't even fear a level 7 transcendent human. However, he couldn't even withstand a single blow from this young man. Ao Feng stood silently behind Li Mu and watched. Li Mu's attack confirmed his guess. He must have received Ao Qing and Ao Xian's inheritance. Although he still looked like a human, he was no different from a dragon. His body was extremely strong. Not only did he not weaken in the water, he became even stronger. He was more like a dragon than a dragon. After the array formation was destroyed by Li Mu, the White Demon King immediately flew up. He looked at Li Mu in shock and muttered, Your strength?" Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Let's talk about this later. Where are Yinxin and Tingxin?" Thinking of Li Mu's strength, a glimmer of hope appeared in the White Demon King's eyes. He said, "They were taken to the North Sea. Go and save them. It's not too late." Li Mu frowned and asked, "Why are they going to the North Sea?" The White Demon King said, "The elders forced them to marry the silver dragon. I didn't agree, so they trapped me here. The elders have already gone to the North Sea. They want to help Yinxin and Tingxin form a half-dragon body first." Not long after, in the East Sea, two figures sped through the water. The experts of the White Dragon race had gone to the North Sea first. There were only some young and old dragons in the East Sea Dragon Palace. After Li Mu helped the White Demon King suppress the rebellious dragons, he immediately went to the North Sea. Ao Feng had already transformed into his dragon form. At this moment, he was panting heavily as he followed behind Li Mu with difficulty. He said weakly, slow down, slow down. I can't keep up. As a dragon, the absolute overlord of the water, his speed in the sea was actually inferior to a human's. At this moment, Ao Feng's heart was filled with humiliation. Li Mu had already informed Xian Jizi to have the experts of the Black Dragon race on standby in the North Sea. Then he rushed to the North Sea with Ao Feng. He had already learned the details of the matter from the White Demon King. Their family had lived very well in the East Sea in the beginning. They thought that the East Sea Dragon race had already accepted them, but they didn't expect the elders of the White Dragon race to have other plans. It was extremely difficult for the dragon race to reproduce. Tingxin and Yinxin's mother had already been engaged to the Silver Dragon race. Later on, she didn't want her fate to be arranged and escaped from the East Sea. After she met the White Demon King, what happened next happened. The White Dragon race had always been brooding over this matter. On the surface they accepted them, but secretly they had ulterior motives. There was a huge difference between the Dragon Clan and other clans. Clans with the bloodline of the Dragon Clan could transform into a true dragon through continuous transformations. In legends, carps leaping over the Dragon Gate wouldn't happen in reality. However, flood dragons, snakes, and other races with the dragon bloodline could only retain the pure dragon bloodline in their bodies through the dragon race's secret arts. Although their strength was still inferior to a true dragon after the transformation, the children they gave birth to would have the pure dragon bloodline. Even though the dragon race was very proud and viewed all races other than the dragon race as inferior races and didn't want the noble bloodline of the dragon race to be contaminated with their reproductive ability, if they didn't do so, the dragon race of the Four Seas would have gone extinct long ago. Yinxin and Tingxin had half snake bloodline and half dragon bloodline. After removing the snake bloodline in their bodies, they would become true dragons. This was naturally a good thing for the White Dragon race. It meant that they could send the two sisters to the Silver Dragon race for marriage. However, at that time, Yinxin and Tingxin wouldn't be the Green Snake and White Snake sisters that Li Mu knew. In addition, on this trip to the North Sea, other than saving the two sisters, he also had to save their mother. Back then, she had angered the Silver Dragon race by running away from the marriage. Although more than 20 years had passed, the Silver Dragon race still wanted the White Dragon race to fulfill the marriage agreement and forced her to marry the Silver Dragon race. As a result, the White Demon King was imprisoned. Ao Feng used all his strength to barely keep up with Li Mu. He couldn't help but say, the White Dragon race didn't do anything wrong in this matter. Every dragon has the heavy responsibility of inheriting the race on their shoulders. As a dragon, she betrayed her race. If all dragons were like her, the dragon race would have long ceased to exist. If this happened to the Black Dragon race, I would definitely punish her according to the race's rules. Regarding this matter, Li Mu didn't argue with Ao Feng. As an individual, every dragon had the right to pursue happiness and love freely. However, for a race, the most important thing was to reproduce and strengthen. Regardless of whether it was the human race, the demon race, or the dragon race, it was the same. Li Mu didn't care about the other dragons, but he wouldn't sit by and watch Yinxin and Tingxin be forced. Even though he knew that the transformation couldn't be so fast and he still had enough time, Li Mu was still impatient. He glanced at Ao Feng behind him and said coldly, "Can you hurry up? You're still so slow in the sea. You're really embarrassing the dragon race." Chapter 629. North Sea Dragon Palace. There were 4 major dragon clans in the 10 continents, each occupying a sea region. The Silver Dragon clan ruled the North Sea, and the billions of water clans in the North Sea all submitted to the Silver Dragon clan. It was a joyous day for the Silver Dragon clan. All the water clan masters gathered near the North Sea Dragon Palace. There weren't many dragons and it was difficult for them to reproduce. Therefore, marriage and reproduction were very important. As the overlord of the North Sea, the Silver Dragon clan had 2 joyous occasions. All the famous water clans in the North Sea came to congratulate them. Among them there was no lack of great demons with 6th realm aura. A human-looking old man with a turtle shell on his back walked to the Dragon Palace. After the guard recorded it, he said loudly, "Surging Waves Island's Master Rashi sends a spiritual armor." Then, a skinny man with a human head and a human body with 8 tentacles and a muscular man with a black dorsal fin on his back walked over. Commander Mo Yuanzhang sends 100,000 spiritual jades. White Shark Clan sends 10 beauties. The North Sea Water Clan masters all gave their gifts and walked into the Dragon Palace. This time, the Silver Dragon King and the third prince were getting married at the same time. It was a rare happy occasion for the Silver Dragon clan. They were connected by marriage to the White Dragon clan of the East Sea. It was said that the Silver Dragon King, who was still the crown prince at the time, had a marriage agreement with a White Dragon clan more than 20 years ago. However, the White Dragon had escaped before the wedding. This incident had once made the Silver Dragon clan a laughingstock in the North Sea. Now that more than 20 years had passed, the White Dragon Lady of the Dragon clan had returned to the clan, and the two clans had brought forward the matter of the past. However, after so many years, the Dragon Lady had married into the Silver Dragon clan again, and her status was naturally not as high as before. The Silver Dragon King was already at the 7th realm, and he already had several spouses. He only married a dragon girl from the White Dragon clan for the sake of procreation. However, all the sovereigns of the Dragon clan had to think of ways to pass down their outstanding bloodline, so the more spouses they had, the better. In addition, the Silver Dragon third prince was also going to marry a pair of sisters. These two sisters were of the Snake clan and had half of the Dragon clan's bloodline. After purifying their bloodline, they could give birth to children with pure Dragon clan's bloodline. Dragon ladies were very rare, and most of them were already partners of the same clan. Partial Dragon clan members like the third Dragon Prince could only marry these half-dragons with impure bloodlines. Deep in the North Sea Dragon Palace, two silver dragons stood in front of a dragon palace, guarding the entrance. Inside the Dragon Palace, a woman stood there with a desolate figure. Beside her was a couple from the Dragon tribe. The Dragon tribe elder sighed and said, "If I had known that this was the elder's trap, I wouldn't have let you come back. We wouldn't have ended up in this situation." The old woman also sighed and said, "I pity those two children." In the corner of the Dragon Palace, In Xian and Ting Xian stood there. One was in a daze while the other looked depressed. Bai Tingxin originally thought that she had found her family after following her parents to the East Sea. She did not expect that not only were her movements restricted by them, but even the spirit conch used to contact Li Mu had been snatched away. Bai Tingxin gritted her teeth. If she had known this would happen, she would have taken more initiative and settled the matter earlier. If she had settled Li Mu at that time, she would not have returned to the East Sea, and the current situation would not have happened. They had not contacted each other for so long. She did not know if he missed them or if he had come to look for them. The East Sea was so big. Without someone to lead the way, he would definitely not be able to find them. In the center of the hall, the Dragon tribe elder looked at his daughter who seemed to have lost her soul. A trace of sorrow appeared in his eyes. After a long time, he seemed to have made a decision and said in a low voice, "For so many years, I have been thinking for the Dragon tribe. Today I want to do something for my daughter." Boom! In the North Sea Dragon Palace, one of the Dragon Palaces suddenly collapsed. Several figures flew out from it. The two guards at the entrance of the Dragon Palace were the first to notice and immediately turned into two silver lights to block them. A white light flew out from the figures and collided with the two silver lights. Then both sides retreated. As for the other figures, they quickly flew to the surface of the sea. "Ao Guang, what are you doing?" A stern voice suddenly came from one of the palaces in front. Another old man with white hair and beard appeared beside him in an instant. The Dragon tribe elder looked at him and said angrily, "First elder, this is unfair to her." The White Dragon tribe's first elder snorted and said, "Fair? Don't forget that as a dragon tribe, we should put our tribe first. She has already humiliated our White Dragon tribe. Do you want her to humiliate us a second time?" As soon as he finished speaking, he wanted to chase up but was stopped by Ao Guang. "You overestimate yourself." He snorted and did not even look at Ao Guang. His figure disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already in front of the other four figures. They were only a few feet away from the surface of the sea. However, this distance could never be crossed. The White Dragon tribe's first elder rolled up his sleeves and brought them back to the bottom of the sea. Then he locked the mother and daughters in another palace. After sealing the palace with a formation, he said to Ao Guang and his wife, "You have humiliated the East Sea. When you go back, you and your wife will be punished to face the wall for 3 years." Then he turned to the elders behind him and said, "I'm sorry. Our tribe members are ignorant and have made a fool of themselves." A Silver Dragon tribe elder glanced at him and said, "There are a lot of people in the East Sea who don't know the rules. When you go back, discipline them well. Before you discipline them, don't let them come out and humiliate us again." The White Dragon tribe's first elder's expression was a little unnatural. However, the Silver Dragon tribe was stronger than the White Dragon tribe. He could only smile apologetically and said, I will discipline them well. At this time in a palace, a woman held Een Xian and Ting Xian's hands and said guiltily, "It's mother who has implicated you." Een Xian collected her disappointment and shook her head. "Mother, don't say that. You also fell into their trap." Ting Xian sighed and murmured, "Are we really not fated to be together in this life? If the heavens give me another chance, I will definitely not leave the divine capital." The incident just now was just a small interlude. After the interlude, the North Sea Dragon Palace quickly regained its peace. In the main hall of the Dragon Palace, the Silver Dragon Tribe and the White Dragon Tribe's elders took their seats respectively. The incident just now made the Silver Dragon Tribe's people look a little ugly. The White Dragon Tribe's elders could only lower their posture. After all, the Silver Dragon Tribe's strength was second only to the Black Dragon Tribe. Moreover, the powerhouses of the Silver Dragon Tribe still had a long lifespan. On the other hand, the White Dragon Tribe's strength was the weakest of the four seas. The two Seventh Realm Elders only had a dozen years left in their lifespans. In front of the Silver Dragon Tribe, they did not even have the confidence to speak loudly. In order to obtain the Silver Dragon Tribe's protection, the White Dragon Tribe had not only sacrificed their people this time but also brought a lot of dowry. Of course, the Silver Dragon Tribe also saw their predicament. They originally wanted to use the incident just now to make the White Dragon Tribe pay some other price. However, before they could speak, 3 Silver Dragon Tribe elders suddenly stood up and looked out of the palace. Then they quickly flew out. The 2 Seventh Realm Elders of the White Dragon Tribe also sensed something and flew out with the Silver Dragon Tribe. The seawater in the distance was deep and serene. In the eyes of other Water Tribe members, there was nothing there. However, in the eyes of the Dragon Tribe's powerhouses, there were 5 black giant dragons in the distant seawater rushing towards them. The first elder of the White Dragon Tribe looked to his side and asked in surprise, "You invited the Black Dragon Tribe?" The first elder of the Silver Dragon Tribe shook his head and said in surprise, "No, I thought you invited them." The first elder of the White Dragon Tribe was puzzled. "Then why are they here? To congratulate us?" The Silver Dragon Tribe's reputation is so great that even the Black Dragon King and the 4 elders of the Wind, Rain, Thunder and Lightning Tribe personally came to congratulate us. Chapter 630. Although the dragon races of the 4 seas were all part of the dragon race, they each had their own way of doing things. Other than the occasional marriage alliance, they did not have much contact with each other. This was especially so for the Black Dragon race, who thought highly of themselves. Because they were the most talented among the dragon races and had produced many powerful fighters, they did not care about the other 3 dragon races at all. The Black Dragon King and the 4 elders actually came personally for the marriage alliance between the North Sea and the East Sea. This was out of everyone's expectations. Although they were surprised, the Silver Dragon and the White Dragon elders immediately flew outside the North Sea Dragon Palace to personally welcome the Black Dragon race's arrival. This action naturally attracted the attention of the guests in the Dragon Palace. The elders of the 2 races were both Realm 7 fighters. Who was this person that was qualified for them to collectively welcome him? These Water Tribe powerful fighters did not dare to be negligent. They all came outside the Dragon Palace and stood respectfully behind the elders of the 2 races, looking ahead curiously. A few black figures gradually appeared at the end of their vision. Although they were still very blurry, the pressure coming from afar made everyone present feel a suffocating pressure. The black figures were extremely fast and gradually became clearer. Murmurs came from the crowd. "It's the Black Dragons." They actually came too. The Black Dragon race is the leader of the dragon races of the 4 seas. Is the Silver Dragon race so important? Under everyone's gaze, the 5 black dragons quickly arrived in front of the Dragon Palace and transformed into 5 human figures. 4 of them were elders with extremely powerful auras. The last one was a middle-aged man with a slightly weaker aura, but he also had Realm 7 cultivation. 5 Realm 7 fighters of the Black Dragon race came. The Silver Dragon race's first elder walked forward and smiled with cupped fists. 4 elders and the Black Dragon King's arrival should have been notified in advance so that we could prepare in advance. Facing the Silver Dragon race's first elder, Ao Feng and the other 3 elders did not speak. The Black Dragon King also maintained his silence. At this moment, the North Sea powerful fighters, including the Silver Dragon and White Dragon elders, realized that there was a human standing in front of the Black Dragon King and the 4 elders. However, everyone only had eyes for the Black Dragon race and ignored his existence from beginning to end. Now that they finally noticed him, they were shocked to find that this person was standing in front of the Black Dragon King and the 4 great elders of the Black Dragon clan, and the 5 experts of the Black Dragon clan seemed to be led by this person. Only then did the first elder of the Silver Dragon clan come to his senses. He was both surprised and doubtful, but he still looked at Li Mu kindly and asked, "This is?" Li Mu did not reply. He scanned the North Sea Dragon Palace with his spiritual perception and soon found 2 pitiful and helpless sisters locked in a palace. His figure disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of the palace. The elders of the Silver Dragon clan and the White Dragon clan were shocked. This was the first time they had seen a human being able to display speed comparable to that of the Dragon clan at a depth of 10,000 feet. "Who is it?" The 2 Silver Dragon guards at the entrance of the palace immediately discovered this uninvited guest, and they were just about to step forward to stop him when their bodies were sent flying through the air. Li Mu took a step forward. Suddenly, an obstruction appeared in front of him. It was the array formation that covered the entire palace. With a sweep of his aura, the array formation burst like a soap bubble. Li Mu took a step forward and appeared in the palace. The commotion outside immediately attracted the attention of the 3 people in the palace. The woman looked at Li Mu with surprise and confusion. After being stunned for a moment, the other 2 figures turned into 2 figures, one green and one white, and flew towards Li Mu. Yin Xen grabbed Li Mu's hand tightly, her face full of joy. Ting Xen, on the other hand, hung on Li Mu's body as usual, sobbing, "You finally came to save me. They bullied me and my sister." At this moment, the elders of the Silver Dragon clan and the White Dragon clan also rushed over. They looked at the scene in front of them in surprise. Li Mu took Ting Xen off her body and gently patted her head. He looked back at everyone and asked, "Who bullied you?" Ting Xen pointed at the great elder of the White Dragon clan and said, He stole my spiritual snail and forced me, my sister, and my mother to marry someone else. He's the worst." The great elder of the White Dragon clan's face was gloomy. He was about to reprimand her when his expression suddenly changed. He crossed his hands in front of his chest. Bang! After a dull sound, his body seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. He flew out, and all the bones in his body seemed to have fallen apart. Before he could react, his body was hit hard again. He fell from the sky to the ground. A crystal palace was smashed by him, and a huge pit was formed on the ground. The experts of the aquatics who came to the North Sea Dragon Palace to congratulate them were all stunned. Someone dared to make trouble here? A figure flew out from the ruins of the Crystal Palace. As expected of the Dragon clan, even after suffering such a heavy blow, he did not suffer any injuries. He just looked a little embarrassed. However, he felt endless humiliation when he suffered a loss at the hands of a human in front of the Dragon clan and many other members of the aquatics. A long spear appeared in his hand and he said in a cold voice, "You're courting death." As soon as he said that, a spear light pierced through the space of 1,000 feet and headed straight for Li Mu. Ting Xien and Yin Xien, who had chased out of the palace, were shocked. Ting Xien's face was full of regret. She said in a panic, "What should we do? What should we do? I shouldn't have told him. He can't possibly be the great elder's match." Ao Feng glanced at her and said indifferently, "Don't worry. If Ao Yuan was his match, he wouldn't be in such a sorry state." Ao Feng knew very well that although Ao Yuan was older, his strength was only that of an ordinary 7th-level dragon. He could barely win against an ordinary 7th-level human. It was undoubtedly impossible for him to win against Li Mu. No one below the 8th level was his match, whether on land, in the sky, or under the sea. As expected, the great elder of the White Dragon clan was forced to retreat in front of everyone. The aquatics and dragons present could not believe that a human could suppress a 7th-level dragon at the bottom of the North Sea. Seeing this, the other White Dragon clan elder was about to make a move. Ao Feng glanced at him and reminded him, "I advise you not to move." At this moment, Li Mu was barehanded. The great elder of the White Dragon clan seemed to be taking a beating, but it was all physical pain. If they forced Li Mu to take out that spear or that bow, they would have to endure more than physical pain. However, the elder of the White Dragon clan obviously did not listen to Ao Feng's words and joined the battle in the next moment. Then, everyone saw a dazzling green light appear from the human's hand and land heavily on the elder of the White Dragon clan. Boom! He came quickly and left even faster. His body was sent flying by a spear, and another crystal palace was turned into ruins. The Silver Dragon clan elder and Silver Dragon King's expressions were ugly. This human caused trouble in the North Sea Dragon Palace. He clearly did not give the Silver Dragon clan any face. No matter what, they could not let him continue like this. The Silver Dragon King took a step forward. Ao Feng spoke again, "I advise you again. It's best if you don't move. The Silver Dragon King glanced at him and still rushed toward Li Mu without hesitation. Whoosh! Midway through his flight, a simple and unadorned bow appeared in Li Mu's hand, and he shot an arrow without hesitation. Before touching the human, the Silver Dragon King felt a strong sense of danger. This arrow made it impossible for him to retreat or dodge. He only had time to transform into his dragon form and forcefully block it with the strong body of the dragon clan. After a dragon roar that contained extreme pain, a rain of dragon scales fell from the sky above the dragon palace. The Silver Dragon King was covered in wounds. The scales on his body peeled off one by one, and he fell weakly to the ground. The White Dragon Clan's second elder had just climbed up from the ruins. When he saw this scene, he slowly lay back down. As for the White Dragon Clan's great elder, after seeing the power of this arrow, the humiliation and anger on his face instantly disappeared. The figure that rushed toward Li Mu also stopped abruptly. The entire North Sea Dragon Palace was dead silent. Li Mu flew back to Ting Xian's side. He looked around and asked, "Who else bullied you?" Wherever his gaze passed, everyone, including the two Silver Dragon Clan's elders, took a step back. Ting Xian and Ting Xian were already stunned by the scene in front of them. They were so stunned that they could not speak. At this moment, the Silver Dragon Clan's great elder glared at Ao Feng and said loudly, "Is the Black Dragon Clan betraying the Dragon Clan? You are not his match. What does it have to do with the Black Dragon Clan? Did we attack?" Ao Feng could not help but say, "Moreover, I already advised you just now. Did anyone listen to me?" The Silver Dragon Clan and the White Dragon Clan had a total of 5 seventh realms. Among them, there were 2 from the White Dragon Clan and 3 from the Silver Dragon Clan. The Silver Dragon King had clearly lost the ability to fight back. As long as the Black Dragon Clan did not attack, could this human fight against 4 of them alone? The Silver Dragon Clan's great elder looked at Li Mu, whose aura had weakened by 20%, and said in a deep voice, "Attack together. You can't shoot many arrows." At this moment, Ao Feng knew that the Black Dragon Clan could not sit by and watch anymore. As dragons, they did not want to help Li Mu fight against their own clan, but they could not let the White Dragon Clan and the Silver Dragon Clan continue to make mistakes. Not to mention that the 4 of them might not be able to turn the situation around even if they joined forces. Even if Li Mu was not a match for him, if he wanted to escape, no dragon here could stop him. Then what? The White Dragon Clan and the Silver Dragon Clan would definitely face his endless revenge. His revenge was not something that these 2 clans could bear. Ao Feng took a step forward and said in a low voice, "Stop." The Silver Dragon Clan's great elder looked at him and said in a deep voice, "Is the Black Dragon Clan really going to help an outsider fight against your own clan?" Ao Feng's lips trembled as he transmitted a few words to him. The Silver Dragon Clan's great elder's expression changed slightly as he transmitted a message. "Is what you said true?" Ao Feng said indifferently, "You have no idea how powerful this person is. If the 4 of you attack together, at least one of you will die here today, and you won't be able to stop him. The next time he comes, he won't be alone. For the sake of the Dragon Clan, let me remind you. If you still insist on doing things your own way, I can't do anything." The Silver Dragon Clan's great elder's expression kept changing. Ao Feng saw that he wanted to retreat, so he took the initiative to say, "Fighting will hurt the harmony. How about this, everyone give me some face and sit down to talk." Li Mu had already vented his anger for Yin Xian and Ting Xian, and the Silver Dragon Clan also wanted to find a way out. Under Ao Feng's mediation, they temporarily stopped fighting and came to the Silver Dragon Clan's meeting hall. The White Dragon Clan's great elder stared straight at Li Mu and asked, "Who are you? What's your relationship with them? Why are you interfering with our Dragon Clan's family matters?" Li Mu did not have an easy answer to this question. In the past, Li Mu could be said to be their uncle, but the White Demon King had already broken off his relationship with him. Should he say that they were his godsisters? At this moment, Ting Xian, who was at the side, hugged Li Mu's arm tightly. She puffed out her chest and said loudly, "He's our man." Yin Xian heard this and took the initiative to hold Li Mu's arm. Li Mu felt the pressure from both sides. After being stunned for a moment, he looked coldly at the opposite side and said, "You bullied my woman. The White Dragon Clan's debt, I'll settle it with you later." Chapter 631. Li Mu spoke confidently. His aura was so oppressive that the elders of the Azure Dragon and White Dragon could not raise their heads. Ting Xian and Yin Xian's actions reminded Li Mu that the two sisters had the bloodline of the dragon race and could be considered half a member of the dragon race. This matter was also considered a family matter of the East Sea dragon race. Li Mu was not related to them, so what reason did he have to stand up for them? It was different now. It was natural for a man to stand up for his woman. He had already occupied the highest moral ground. The White Dragon and the Silver Dragon race were at a disadvantage in terms of reason. The elders of the White Dragon and the Silver Dragon race did not expect things to turn out like this. This was originally a family matter of the White Dragon race, but now it had become someone else's family matter. If this person was weak, the dragon race would not need any reason at all. They would directly erase his existence and everything would be settled. Unfortunately, this person was extremely strong and had a close relationship with the Black Dragon race. The two races did not have the strength, so it was impossible for them to do that. The Silver Dragon race's Grand Elder could only bite the bullet and say, "The White Dragon race did not tell us about this, so we did not know. Since they are your wives, the marriage agreement with the Silver Dragon race is naturally cancelled. Your Excellency can take them away." Li Mu glanced at him and said indifferently, "I'll take away your dragon girls. I'll let you take them back in a few days. What does the Silver Dragon race think?" This meant that there was no way to be kind. The Silver Dragon race's Grand Elder asked with a sullen face, "Then what do you want?" At this moment, Ao Feng mediated, "Since you've done something wrong, you naturally have to pay some price. This is a matter of course. The mental damage of these two juniors has to be compensated." After the previous incident, Ao Feng already knew the meaning of mental damage compensation, and used it flexibly. The Silver Dragon race's Grand Elder Taoist priest said, "He also seriously injured our Dragon King." Ao Feng waved his hand and said, "There's always a first-come, first-served rule. You captured his wife first, so you were in the wrong first. Besides, the Silver Dragon King also took the initiative to attack. At that time I kindly advised him, but he just didn't listen. Who can you blame now?" The great elder of the Silver Dragon clan could see that Ao Feng was on the side of the human. Although he didn't know what benefits the human had promised him, it was definitely not wise to go against the Black Dragon clan. The Silver Dragon clan had no choice but to accept this loss. It was just that he still did not understand Ao Feng's meaning and asked, "What is mental damage compensation?" Ao Feng said, "It's simple. It's just 100,000 high-grade spiritual jades." Before Li Mu could say anything, Ao Feng had already made the decision for him. This was because the Black Dragon clan had paid such a price back then. The Silver Dragon race's Grand Elder exclaimed in shock, 100,000. 100,000 high-grade spiritual jades was not a small sum. Even a large underwater mine would not be able to gather 100,000 high-grade spiritual jades. Although the Silver Dragon clan had accumulated more than 1,000,000 spiritual jades, that was the result of generations of accumulation. Taking out 100,000 spiritual jades at once was extremely painful. Meanwhile, Ao Feng added, 100,000 per person, a total of 300,000. The other elder of the Silver Dragon clan blurted out, "Why is there an extra 100,000? Ao Feng glanced at him and said, "Not only did you force someone else's wife, you even forced someone else's mother-in-law to marry your Dragon King. 300,000 spiritual jades isn't much. If this matter were to fall on my head, I would definitely exterminate their entire clan." As soon as he said this, the two elders of the Silver Dragon clan fell silent. If it was only this human, the Silver Dragon clan would do their best to keep him in the North Sea. However, the Black Dragon clan's powerhouses had turned out in full force and stood on the side of this human. If they did not agree, things would develop in an unpredictable direction. At that time, the Silver Dragon clan's losses would be more than 300,000 spiritual jades. So far, the Silver Dragon King was seriously injured, and several of the North Sea Dragon clan's crystal palaces had collapsed. Most importantly, the Silver Dragon clan had lost all face in front of the North Sea's aquatic creatures. It could be said that they had suffered heavy losses. In the end, they still had to compensate the troublemakers with so many spiritual jades. When had they ever suffered such a huge loss? With the Black Dragon clan standing up for them, they could only pinch their noses and accept it. The Silver Dragon clan's first elder nodded with difficulty and said, "We are willing to compensate." Ao Feng asked for 300,000 high-grade spiritual jades. After the Silver Dragon clan agreed, Li Mu did not say anything else. He had just caused a ruckus in the North Sea Dragon Palace and seriously injured the Silver Dragon King. It could be said that he had helped the White Demon King vent his anger. 300,000 spiritual jades to compensate Ting Xin and Yin Xin for their mental damage was not considered perfunctory. They were only frightened for a while and did not suffer any substantial injuries. Otherwise, Li Mu would not have let these two clans off so easily. After all, he was now their man. Li Mu's face was cold. He glanced at the two elders of the Silver Dragon clan and said coldly, "If Ao Feng did not plead for mercy for you, I would definitely have wiped out the North Sea Dragon clan today." Beside him, the two sisters Yin Xin and Ting Xin were holding his arm. Their eyes were shining, especially Ting Xin, who was staring straight at Li Mu. Her eyes were full of affection, and she was unwilling to look away for even a moment. Ao Feng was also stunned for a moment. He did not expect Li Mu to care about his face. If anyone else said that they would wipe out the North Sea Dragon clan, Ao Feng would laugh because it was a fool's dream. Since ancient times, no human had been able to defeat the Dragon clan in the sea. However, the man in front of him really had the strength. Li Mu glanced at the two elders of the White Dragon clan. Ao Feng immediately understood. He looked at the two elders of the White Dragon clan and said, "And you too. Outsiders don't dare to bully you, but you only dare to bully your own clansmen. You have embarrassed the Dragon clan. Take out 300,000 spiritual jades and this matter will be settled. Otherwise, no matter what happens in the future, I will not help you." He was not doing this for Li Mu's sake. He just felt that it was unfair. The Black Dragon clan had offended Li Mu and paid a painful price. It also made his heart ache. Seeing the White Dragon clan and Silver Dragon clan suffer the same thing as them, he felt much better. Even the Silver Dragon clan had surrendered. The White Dragon clan only had two elders who did not have much lifespan left. It was even more impossible for them to go against Ao Feng's wishes. They could only grit their teeth and accept it. Li Mu originally wanted to form an alliance with the Dragon clan of the Four Seas. However, it seemed that an alliance was impossible. After witnessing the strength of the Silver Dragon clan and White Dragon clan, Li Mu did not have any intention of forming an alliance with them. He thought that there might be differences in strength between the Dragon clans of the Four Seas, but it should not be too big. He did not expect that only the Black Dragon clan's strength was passable. The Silver Dragon King and the two elders were all trash. The White Dragon clan was even worse. They only had two 7th level elders, and it was obvious that they did not have much lifespan left. It was meaningless to form an alliance with them. After receiving compensation for the two sisters' psychological damage from the Silver Dragon clan, Li Mu brought them back to the East Sea. He was going to take 300,000 spiritual jades from the East Sea Dragon clan before leaving with them. Although the East Sea was their home in a sense, the Dragon clan did not have any human feelings in order to reproduce. It was better not to stay in such a home. In the East Sea Dragon Palace, Li Mu received 300,000 spiritual jades from the White Dragon clan. The White Demon King held his wife's hand. Ting Xin and Yin Xion's mother looked at the Dragon clan couple behind them and said, "Father, Mother, leave the East Sea with us." Ting Xin followed and said, "Grandfather, Grandmother, leave with us." Ao Guang shook his head and said, "No need. We were born in the East Sea and grew up in the East Sea. We don't want to leave here. Besides, we don't have many years left. The bottom of the East Sea is our home." Li Mu had heard the two sisters mention more than once that their grandfather and grandmother were very good to them. This Dragon clan couple's cultivation was at the 6th level, but they would probably stay at the 6th level for the rest of their lives. Unlike Yin Xin and Ting Xin, they had a strong sense of belonging to the East Sea Dragon clan. No one could force them to leave if they did not want to. However, if they left just like that and left them here to die, Yin Xin and Ting Xin would probably feel uncomfortable. Li Mu thought for a moment, then pointed at a palace behind him and said, "The two of you come with me. Yinshin, you come in as well." Hearing this, Ting Xin puffed out her chest and said unhappily, "Why are you only letting my sister go in?" Letting Yin Xin go in was because she could help Li Mu set up the formation. However, if Ting Xin was not allowed to go in, she would definitely let her imagination run wild. Li Mu waved his hand and said, Okay. If you want to come in together." Ao Feng stood outside the palace and glanced at the two elders of the White Dragon clan. He said, "You don't have much time left. If it wasn't for this incident, he might have used the Talisman of Divine Secret to extend your lives by 10 years. No. Talisman of Divine Secret." The two elders of the White Dragon clan looked at each other. After realizing what Ao Feng meant, they saw regret in each other's eyes. Although 10 years couldn't let them break through to the 8th realm, they could protect the White Dragon clan for 10 more years. However, it was useless to regret now. The White Dragon clan's first elder Ao Yuan forced a smile and comforted himself. Even if you give us another 10 years, it won't be of much use. The talisman of divine secret is useless to us. Living for one more day was still living. These two dragons were just comforting themselves. Ao Feng didn't expose them. After a full 2 hours, Ao Feng and the other Dragon Clan experts suddenly felt that the spiritual energy in the surroundings was abnormal. Soon it returned to normal. Then a few figures walked out of the palace. Walking in front was a middle-aged couple from the White Dragon Clan. Ao Feng's gaze swept past them and the next moment he looked back. His dragon eyes were wide open as he said in shock, This couple was clearly Ao Guang and his wife who had just walked in. However, compared to before, they seemed to be dozens of years younger. Their white hair had turned black, and the wrinkles on their faces had disappeared. They looked radiant. When the mother and daughter stood together, they looked like sisters. Ao Feng looked at Li Mu and said in disbelief, What did you do to them? Li Mu shot a glance at Ao Feng and said indifferently, It's nothing. It merely extended their lifespans by 60 years. Chapter 632. 160 years. Ao Feng turned around and stared at the young Ao Guang and his wife. The aura of death and lethargy on the two dragons, who were nearing the end of their lifespans, had been replaced by vigorous vitality. This was not something that could be covered up by illusions or other magical powers. Ao Feng knew that the divine secret talisman could help extend one's lifespan. However, it could only extend lifespan by 10 years for cultivators at the 6th realm and 3 to 5 years for cultivators at the 7th realm. However, Ao Guang and his wife had directly reversed 60 years. This was definitely not something that the divine secret talisman could do. Ao Feng stared at Li Mu and asked, How did you do it? Li Mu said indifferently, Just set up a random array formation. The heaven-stealing array could extend the lifespan of at most 10 people at the same time. The cost of the array formation was related to the cultivation level and number of people whose lifespans were being extended. Yan Xian and Yan Xian's grandparents were only at the 6th realm. They only needed to set up a small array formation, and it would not consume too many spirit jades. With Li Mu's current wealth, he could definitely afford it. Ao Feng was stunned for a moment. Then excitement appeared on his face. As the great elder of the Black Dragon tribe and the most powerful member of the Black Dragon tribe, he was actually at a loss at this moment. He rubbed his hands and asked tentatively, Can you also set up one for us? Then he added, The price is negotiable. 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 spirit jades? He knew better than anyone what an extra 60 years of lifespan meant to the Black Dragon tribe. With the Black Dragon tribe's talent, this meant that he could easily advance to the 8th realm before his lifespan was exhausted. Ao Yu, Ao Lei, Ao Dian, and also had the possibility of advancing to the Dao integration stage. Once they advanced, their lifespan would be extended by another 60 years. At that time, the Black Dragon tribe would dominate the entire world. At this moment, Ao Feng seemed to have already seen this day. His eyes shone brightly. However, Li Mu's next words were like a bucket of cold water poured over his head, completely extinguishing his dreams and ambitions. Li Mu looked at Ao Feng expressionlessly and asked, Do I look stupid? After Ao Feng recovered from his excitement, he realized a problem. The reason why Ao Guang and his wife could obtain such benefits was because they were the grandfather and grandmother of Li Mu's woman. In other words, they were Li Mu's grandfather and grandmother. What was the relationship between Ao Feng and Li Mu? If there was a relationship between them, it would be a relationship between them as enemies. At this moment, Ao Feng wished that he had 1 or 2 beautiful granddaughters. Unfortunately, his son was disappointing and only gave birth to 1 son. Ao Feng looked embarrassed as he said to Li Mu, I know that we had some misunderstandings before, but it's all in the past now. Li Mu pursed his lips and asked, Misunderstanding? You don't want the sun-shooting bow anymore? Although he still wanted the sun-shooting bow, it was obvious that he couldn't get it. He might as well give up on that thought. Ao Feng said firmly, No. Actually, the sun-shooting bow didn't belong to the Black Dragons. My ancestor Ao Shen accidentally picked it up one day. Li Mu continued, I made you lose a lot of spiritual jades. You won't hold a grudge against me because of this, right? Ao Feng shook his head and said, No, how could I? This is the compensation that I deserve. Li Mu smiled and said, If you want me to help you set up this formation, it's not completely impossible. It will depend on your Black Dragon clan's performance in the future. Overall, Li Mu was satisfied with Ao Feng and the Black Dragon clan's performance in the past few days. At present, the Black Dragon clan's talent and potential were indeed the best that Li Mu had seen. If he could turn them into reliable allies, he would have another powerful force to fight against the Demon Dao. However, although the Black Dragon clan was strong, they were not under Li Mu's control. If he was not careful, he would suffer a backlash. Before he had absolute strength, it was impossible for him to set up the sky-stealing formation for Ao Feng and the others. Performance in the future was a very vague phrase, but at least there was still a glimmer of hope. The Black Dragon clan could only grasp this glimmer of opportunity and satisfy Li Mu. Only then would they have the hope of regaining their glory. At this moment, Ao Feng was extremely regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would not have wanted the sun-shooting Bao and would not have become enemies with the Fugu school. At the same time, the two elders of the White Dragon clan also looked regretful when they saw Ao Guang and his wife, who were dozens of years younger. This should have been the opportunity for the White Dragon clan to rise, but because of their wrong decision, they had missed the opportunity to increase their lifespan by 60 years. The two dragons' thoughts raced as they tried to think of a way to redeem themselves. Although Ao Guang and his wife's talent was not high, with an additional 60 years of lifespan, they would definitely be able to break through to the seventh realm. At that time, when the two of them died, they would be the guardians of the White Dragon clan. The two of them exchanged a few words through telepathy. The White Dragon clan's Grand Elder suddenly looked at Ao Guang and said with a solemn expression, "Ao Guang." The Grand Elder had supreme authority in the clan. Ao Guang immediately said, "Here." The White Dragon clan's Grand Elder Lao Dao said, "The two of us don't have much lifespan left. We can't protect the White Dragon clan for long. After our discussion, we've decided to appoint you as the new White Dragon King. From now on, the heavy responsibility of guarding the East Sea will be handed over to you." When had the two elders been so polite to him? They even wanted him to be the White Dragon King. Ao Guang was stunned on the spot, not knowing how to answer. The White Dragon clan's Grand Elder looked at him and asked, "Are you unwilling?" Ao Guang came back to his senses and immediately said, "I'm willing. Ao Guang swears to protect the East Sea in our clan." Li Mu could tell that the series of actions of the two elders of the White Dragon clan were done for him to see. These two old dragons were also nearing the end of their lifespan. They had their eyes on the sky-stealing array. He did not look at the two of them at all. He said to Yin Xining, "Let's go." At this moment, the White Dragon clan's Grand Elder immediately stepped forward and said, "Sir, please wait. This matter is our White Dragon clan's fault. 300,000 spiritual jades are not enough to express our apology. Please stay for a few more days and give us a chance to apologize." Li Mu did not respond. Instead, he looked at Yin Xining and Ting Xan and asked, "What do you think?" Ting Xan held Li Mu's arm tightly and said, "I'll listen to you." Yin Xining looked at her mother and saw that there was some reluctance in her eyes. She looked at Li Mu, nodded and said, "Then let's stay for a few more days." Li Mu did not say anything more. The White Dragon clan had arranged a luxurious crystal palace for him. Li Mu sat cross-legged on the crystal bed and looked inside at the upper-level spiritual jades piled up like a mountain in the heavenly flask cave. His heart was already blooming with joy. The sisters had given all the spiritual jades to Li Mu, so that Li Mu's trip to the East Sea and North Sea this time was even more fruitful than the trip to the Black Dragon clan. With these spiritual jades, the strength of the Fugu school's disciples would usher in a big surge in 2 or 3 years. At a certain moment, Li Mu withdrew his mind and looked at the door. 2 figures pushed the door open and came in. Li Mu looked at Yin Xining and Ting Xan and asked, "It's so late. Why don't you go to sleep? What are you doing here?" Ting Xan held Yin Xining's arm, strode to the bed and said, "We're here to rest. We're your women. Of course we should be with you at night." Li Mu was stunned and said, "That was just a temporary measure. If I hadn't said that at that time, what reason would I have to save you?" A sly look appeared on Ting Xian's face and she said, "What temporary measure? You've already accepted the dowry of 600,000 spiritual jades. Do you still want to go back on your word?" "You." Li Mu looked at them. Yin Xining avoided his eyes, but Ting Xan stuck out her chest and said, "Now the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas knows that we're your women. I don't care how you want us to marry in the future. You have to be responsible for us." Li Mu finally realized what was going on. Although he was acting, they were clearly trying to turn the act into reality. Chapter 633. Ting Xian's feelings for him had always been clear, but Inshin was different. She had always been very reserved, but this time she actually followed her sister, which meant that they were really serious about each other. Fortunately, Li Mu had already expected this day. Their names were on the Empress list. All the names that appeared on that piece of paper could be written in the household register of the Li family. This matter had already been approved by the Empress. Today's Li Mu was no longer the little constable who had just met them. He did not evade or change the topic but looked at them and asked, "Have you really thought it through?" Ting Xen pounced on him and threw him onto the bed. Her slender legs wrapped tightly around his waist and said, "I have already thought it through thousands of times. I have decided that you are my man in this life." Inshin grabbed Li Mu's hand shyly and said softly, I have also thought about it." The crystal palace was brightly lit. Inshin and Ting Xen snuggled up to Li Mu on both sides, whispering softly. In another palace of the East Sea Dragon Palace, the White Dragon clan's first elder Ao Yuan had just ordered the White Dragon King to abdicate. The White Dragon King was only at the 6th realm and was his nephew. A few years ago, Ao Yuan personally supported him to take the throne, and today he personally pulled him down from the position of Dragon King. The future of the White Dragon clan was in the hands of Ao Guang's 2 granddaughters, but because of the previous mistakes, they could no longer make up for it. They could only settle for the next best thing, which was to bet heavily on Ao Guang. Ao Guang and his wife had a good relationship with them. When Ao Guang became the White Dragon King, the revitalization of the East Sea Dragon clan was on his shoulders. How could they, who had the blood of the White Dragon clan, not help him? While the 2 elders of the White Dragon clan were thinking about Li Mu, Ao Feng was also pacing back and forth in the residence of the Black Dragon clan. At a certain moment, he looked at the other black dragons and asked, "Think carefully. Are there any young, beautiful, unmarried female dragons in the clan?" The few black dragons racked their brains to think. The Black Dragon King shook his head and said, "No, all the female dragons who have reached the age of marriage have already found partners. As for the others, they are either too young or too old. Those who are neither young nor old are not beautiful enough." Ao Feng sighed. The only way he could think of to get on Li Mu's good side was blocked just like that. The 2 most obvious characteristics of this person were his greed for money and his lust for women. After plundering the 3 dragon clans, if the Dark Dragon clan wanted to offer him any more spiritual jades, they would have to go bankrupt. It was not the best choice. She could think of a way to deal with his lust. Ao Guang and his wife gained 60 years of lifespan just because they had 2 beautiful granddaughters. Ao Feng was so envious that he was about to cry. Unfortunately, the Dark Dragon race did not have such a beautiful young female dragon. Just as the Dark Dragon race's experts were at their wits' end, the Dark Dragon King Ao and suddenly said, "I have an idea." Ao Feng immediately said, "What idea? Speak." Aowen said, "Although we don't have them in the West Sea, other places have them. It doesn't have to be a dragon lady of the Dark Dragon clan. The Azure Dragon clan and the Silver Dragon clan can also do." Ao Feng glanced at him and said, "What does this have to do with our Dark Dragon clan?" Aowen continued, "Although he's not from our clan, if we act as the middleman, we'll be able to change his impression of us even if we don't make any contributions." Ao Feng thought for a moment and asked, "What do you mean?" Aowen said, "Don't forget there is a debt in the South Sea. We haven't settled it with them yet." Ao Feng's eyes lit up. "You mean?" Early the next morning, Li Mu came out of the Crystal Palace with women in his arms. Yin Xan and Ting Xan held his arms on both sides with happy smiles on their faces. It looked like he had a good night last night, but in fact, nothing happened last night. The Empress had a name, but she did not give Li Mu the right to act first and report later. The Empress was forced to accept the result of Su He and Phantom Princess's matter. This time, if Li Mu acted first and reported later, what awaited him would definitely not be the same as before. At that time he would definitely have to face the Empress's storm. In addition to this reason, Li Mu also had to take care of Wanwan and Xiao Bai's feelings. After all, they were the first to appear by Li Mu's side, but they were repeatedly cut in line by others. In their hearts they would definitely feel that Li Mu did not like them anymore. Little girls like to let their imaginations run wild, so he had to consider their feelings. The White Demon King's family originally planned to leave the East Sea, but after a night, they changed their mind and planned to stay here. Before leaving, the White Demon King looked at Li Mu meaningfully and said, "Take care of them and remember to come back to the East Sea often." He did not let Yin Xian and Ting Xian stay. Instead, he let Li Mu take them away as if entrusting them to him for the rest of his life. Li Mu nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will take good care of them." The mother of the two sisters also brought them to the side and said something. After that, the eyes of the mother and daughters were a little red. 2 hours later, Li Mu led the two sisters and the Black Dragon race to the East Sea's coast. On the way, Li Mu looked at Ao Feng and said, after reaching the shore, return to Mount Baiyun first. Ao Feng rolled his eyes and said, we still have some things to deal with. After we are done, we will return to Mount Baiyun. In the past, the Black Dragon race did not like Fulu school. After all, living under someone else's roof and being controlled by others was not a good life. However, the situation now was different. They wished they could stay at Mount Baiyun. Not to mention 8 or 10 years, if Li Mu could extend their lifespans by 60 years, they would be willing to move the West Sea Dragon Palace to Mount Baiyun. Li Mu nodded and said, you guys go do your things first. He was not worried that Ao Feng and the other Black Dragon race experts would run away. The backbone of the Black Dragon race was at Mount Baiyun. The Black Dragon race would not abandon their people. After Ao Feng and the others left, Li Mu, Yin Xian, and Ting Xian came to the East County. He accompanied them to walk around the East County and taste the local delicacies. They had been restricted for a long time and had not come into contact with the mortal world for a long time. Just as Li Mu was taking the two sisters to play and relieve his mood, Ao Feng brought the other 3 elders and the Black Dragon King to the South Sea Dragon Palace. The 4 elders and the Black Dragon King came to visit the strongest Black Dragon race in the 4 seas, which shocked the entire South Sea Dragon Palace. The Azure Dragon race and the White Dragon race were the weakest in the 4 seas. Only the Dragon King and the first elder of the Azure Dragon race were at the 7th realm. The Black Dragon race had so many experts that it was enough to destroy the entire Azure Dragon race. The Azure Dragon King led his people out of the South Sea Dragon Palace and asked nervously, elders and the Black Dragon King, why did you suddenly come to the South Sea? Ao Feng glanced at him and said indifferently, if I remember correctly, the Black Dragon race and your Azure Dragon race still have a marriage agreement, right? The Azure Dragon King's heart skipped a beat. He immediately said, it's because I did not discipline her well that the ignorant junior sneaked away. We have already returned the betrothal gifts double the amount that the Black Dragon race gave. Ao Feng looked at him coldly and said, do you think that returning the betrothal gifts double the amount can redeem the Black Dragon race's lost face? I have brought the betrothal gifts for you this time. Which dragon girl of the right age in your race do you have? We want to take them away. There are no dragon girls of the right age in our race. The Azure Dragon King looked worried. He finally gritted his teeth and said, Man Xen, come out. Behind him, a dragon girl's face was pale. She shook her head and said, Father, I don't want to marry them. The Azure Dragon King's expression was solemn. He said, this is a debt that our Azure Dragon race owes. You're my daughter. You must know how to sacrifice for the race. Ao Feng looked at the Azure Dragon King's daughter. A few black lines appeared on his forehead. This girl's appearance was average. She was tall and muscular, powerful and domineering. If the Black Dragon race gave a dragon girl like Li Mu, they probably would not have the chance to extend their lifespan by another 60 years. Ao Feng waved his hand and said, don't. Leave your daughter to your Azure Dragon race. We want the one from last time. You better find her within half a month. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Chapter 634. The Azure Dragon race originally had the opportunity to form a marriage alliance with the Black Dragon race, but a few months before the wedding, the Dragon Lady of the Azure Dragon race suddenly ran away and disappeared. Not only did the marriage alliance come to an end, but it also completely angered the Black Dragon race. Now that the Black Dragon race's elders and Dragon King came to question them, the Azure Dragon race had to give them a satisfactory explanation. Otherwise, the Southern Sea would never have peace again. The Azure Dragon King looked at one of his race and said coldly, Ao Qin, look at how much trouble your daughter has brought to the Southern Sea. The middle-aged dragon lowered his head and said apologetically, it's all my fault for not teaching her well. Please punish me, Dragon King. The Azure Dragon King waved his hand and said, punish? What's the use of punishing? If I punish you, will the Black Dragon race let us go? The most important thing now is to get your daughter back and solve the problem the Azure Dragon race is facing. Ao Qin looked troubled and said, I also don't know where she is. The Azure Dragon King glanced at him and said indifferently, don't think I don't know. You are still in contact with her. In the past, the Black Dragon race didn't force you, so I could turn a blind eye. Now that we are facing a strong enemy, I can't ruin the entire Azure Dragon race because of her. Ao Qin lowered his head and was silent for a long time. Finally, he sighed and said with difficulty, "Okay, I will call her back." Li Mu brought in Xian and Ting Xian to play for a few days and then returned to the divine capital. Ting Xian and the Empress hadn't seen each other for a long time and went to the Imperial Garden to catch up. Ling Long helped her look through the memorials in the Chang'e Palace. Li Mu looked around and found that something seemed to be missing in the hall. He thought for a while and asked, "Where's Ching Xian?" In the past, when he came to the Chang'e Palace, Ching Xian would always be leaning on a pillar in the corner, gnawing on chicken wings, duck neck, or the pork shoulder made by the imperial chef. Today he didn't see her. There was no aura of her in the entire palace. Ling Long raised her head and said, "Something seemed to have happened at home." She went back to the Southern Sea. Southern Sea? Li Mu was surprised. She was forced to escape from the marriage. How could she run back? He continued to ask, "What happened at home?" Ling Long shook her head and said, "She didn't say anything but she left in a hurry. There must be something urgent. For her to return to the South Sea, the matter must be very important." Li Mu took out the sound transmission Dharma artifact that Emoli had specially made for him and activated it with his mana. After a long while, a voice came from the other side. "Lord Li," Ching Xian's voice was somewhat downcast. Li Mu asked, "I heard from Ling Long that you returned to the South Sea. What happened?" Ching Xian was silent for a while before she said, "It's because I've been away from home for too long. Mother misses me, so I came back to see her." She had indeed left home for a long time, so it was normal for her family to miss her. After confirming that she was fine, Li Mu didn't ask any more questions and said, "Then you should accompany your parents." At that moment, in the South Sea Dragon Palace, Ching Xian put away his voice transmission Dharma artifact and lowered his head. The disappointment on his face deepened. Beside her, a man sighed. "Father and mother have let you down." Ching Xian shook her head and said, "It's not father and mother's fault. I was too stubborn. I should have prioritized the South Sea." After her parents left, Ching Xian sat by the bed alone. She curled up her legs and buried her head between her knees. Images flashed through her mind. Sister Empress, Sister Mei, Sister Ali, the duck neck and chicken wings from the Imperial kitchen, and the braised pork shoulder. The time she left the South Sea was the happiest time of her life. At first, when she was captured by Lord Li and became his mount, she was unwilling. Later on, she realized that there was nothing wrong with being a mount. She had food, drinks and fun to play with. Even her cultivation had reached Realm 6 in advance, surpassing her parents. She originally thought that her beautiful life could go on like this. It wasn't until her father sent her a message that her mother was sick that she hurriedly rushed back to the South Sea from the Immortals' capital. However, when she found that her mother was safe and sound and that the Black Dragon tribe was already waiting here, she realized what had happened. It turned out that she couldn't escape in the end. The Black Dragon tribe was the most powerful tribe in the Four Seas. If she continued to resist, it would bring a huge disaster to the South Sea and even implicate her parents. She would make her parents sinners of the Green Dragon tribe. Therefore she chose to obey. Marrying a dragon that she didn't like and had never even met was the fate of every dragon girl. Her fate had changed before, but it returned to the beginning. Ching Xian lowered her head and clenched the sound transmission ritual implement in her hand. This item carried the most beautiful memory of her dragon life. It was a person that she feared, admired, and secretly admired. However, all of this would become a dusty past, sealed in her memory forever. In the Chang'e Palace, Li Mu didn't know what happened in the South Sea. He put away the sound transmission ritual implement and asked Exquisite, "During this time, did anything major happen in the Great Zhou?" During the time that Li Mu wasn't here, Exquisite had been helping the Empress deal with these matters. Exquisite shook her head and said, "Nothing. During this time the people of the Great Zhou lived and worked in peace and contentment. The people's faith steadily increased. The existence of the Department of Consecration and the Department of Demons ensured that the security of the 36 counties was stable. The various decrees of the imperial court were aimed at continuously raising the living standards of the people. Today the Great Zhou's internal troubles had disappeared and its external troubles had been quelled. It had entered a long-term period of stable development. Compared to the Great Zhou, the situation of some countries was completely different. The surrounding countries in the south were also stable. Only the Shin nation encountered some trouble. The Shin nation was located in the southwest of the Zhou continent. Its north was bordered by the Great Zhou, and its southwest was bordered by Yanzhou. Yanzhou was also a continent with a large population. Unlike the small countries in the Zhou continent that relied on the central dynasty, Yanzhou had dozens of countries. There were endless conflicts between countries. During this time, some of the countries bordering Yanzhou and the Xin nation spread the flames of war to the Xin nation. The Great Zhou court also received some news. After all, the officials of the imperial court were very aware of the danger in times of peace. The Great Zhou and the Xin nation had finally settled down with great difficulty. If the Xin nation was destroyed by Yanzhou, the southern border of the Great Zhou would be threatened again. Fortunately, the Xin nation couldn't withstand a single blow from the Great Zhou. However, in the eyes of the Xin nation, the countries of Yanzhou were all its younger brothers. The moment their borders were invaded, the Xin nation gave them a head-on blow. A large country in Yanzhou suffered tens of thousands of casualties and immediately retreated from the Xin nation's borders. This matter didn't affect the Great Zhou, so Li Mu didn't take it to heart. After discussing political matters with Exquisite for a while, the sound transmission magical artifact suddenly vibrated. It was actually AO Run calling. In order to facilitate communication, Li Mu also gave one of this magical artifacts to the Black Dragon clan. Li Mu picked up the sound transmission magical artifact. After a while he asked doubtfully, "Your Black Dragon clan wants to give me a surprise." "What surprise?" Chapter 635. Ever since he knew that Li Mu could set up the sky-stealing formation and extend people's lifespan by 60 years, Ao Feng became more attentive to Li Mu in all aspects. In the past, even when he was by Li Mu's side, he was reluctant and did not smile. Later on, he was always at Li Mu's beck and call, serving him tea and flattering him to the best of his ability. Now he said that he wanted to give Li Mu a surprise. He must be trying to curry favor with Li Mu again, hoping that Li Mu could extend their lifespan by 60 years. Of course, Li Mu would not extend their lifespan now. However, Li Mu planned to accept the surprise of the Black Dragon race. The dragon race was the richest race in the world. It would be a waste not to take advantage of it. Li Mu asked, "Where is the surprise?" Ao Feng said, "Where are you now? I will send it to you." Li Mu was in Shendu now. However, he planned to return to Mount Baiyun to send back the spiritual jades that he had obtained from the East Sea and North Sea. Thus he said, "Send it to Mount Baiyun first. I will be there soon." Not long after he put away the sound-transmitting instrument, the Empress walked in from outside. She looked at Exquisite and said, "Exquisite, you go out first." Exquisite looked up at her and then at Li Mu. Then she put down the booklet in her hand and ran out quickly. Zhou Yi crossed her arms and looked at Li Mu. She asked, "Don't you have anything to tell me?" Li Mu raised his hands and said, "I will tell you. That day in the East Sea, Yinxin and Tingxin expressed their feelings to me. However, I did not do anything. Instead, I returned to Shendu to ask for your Majesty's instructions." Zhou Yi glared at him and asked, "Ask for my instructions? Ask for my instructions? If I did not agree, would you send them back to the East Sea?" Li Mu looked at Zhou Yi and said, "Your Majesty, you said last time that as long as it was written on that paper, you would not care." Zhou Yi's chest heaved. She suddenly regretted letting Li Mu write these names on that piece of paper. This had become his golden ticket to avoid death. The only thing that made her feel a little gratified was that this time, he did not act first and report later. He knew to come back and ask for her permission first. However, what made Zhou Yi angry was that Li Mu didn't act first and report later. If he really did that, Zhou Yi would have an excuse to make trouble for him. Now she could only suppress her anger in her heart. After all, she was the one who said that she would not care about his past. A monarch's words were not a joke. As the Empress, how could she go back on her words? Zhou Yi could only comfort herself with the fact that the Tingxin sisters were also on her side. If it weren't for Tingxin, she didn't know how long it would take for her to face her own heart and confide her feelings to Li Mu. How could she burn the bridge after crossing it? She began to recall the names on the paper. Tingxin, Yinxin, Qingxin, Hulu, and Ali. Now only Qingxin, Hulu, and Ali were left. Ali would not like Li Mu. Hulu was far away in the Yao Kingdom, so she didn't care much. As for Qingxin, she had already returned to the South Sea. Even if she came back, she would be by her side and wouldn't give him a chance to take advantage of her. Zhou Yi was relieved. She glanced at Li Mu and said, "Of course I remember what I said. I also like Tingxin very much. In the future, let her accompany me in the palace." Li Mu shrugged and said, "As long as she is willing." After getting past the Empress, Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had the foresight. If he hadn't written Tingxin and Yinxin's names, he wouldn't have been able to get past the Empress so easily this time. After leaving the palace, Li Mu planned to return to Mount Baiyun to hand over the spiritual jades to the sect and see what the surprise Ao Feng mentioned was. Could it be 1,000,000 high-grade spiritual jades? Or did they find a huge spiritual jade mine at the bottom of the sea? Li Mu felt that Ao Feng had been by his side for a long time. He should know what he liked. Nothing could surprise him more than 1,000,000 spiritual jades or an entire spiritual jade mine. After all, the cultivation of the sect disciples required spiritual jades. The activation of the teleportation array required spiritual jades. The great sky-stealing array required spiritual jades. Writing talismans, refining pills, refining weapons, and setting up arrays all required spiritual jades. In the cultivation world, spiritual jades were both resources and currency. They were the foundation of a sect's rise. People of the devil path could take people's souls and essence blood without any scruples. However, cultivators of the righteous path could only use spiritual jades. Not long after, in the largest Dao palace on the main peak of Mount Baiyun, when Li Mu took out 6 small mountains of high-grade spiritual jades from the flask space, Xian Jizi and the others were only shocked for a moment before their expressions returned to normal. After all, it was not the first time they had seen such a scene. Fu Daozi looked away from the spiritual jades and said to Li Mu, "Disciple, come with me." He brought Li Mu to a palace and said, "Although you have been my disciple for some time, I have not taught you anything. Today I will teach you the Void Talisman Condensation Technique." Void Talisman Condensation Technique was a mystical ability of ancient cultivators when the spirit chi of heaven and earth was still very rich. At that time, Fulu could be directly condensed with the spirit chi of heaven and earth. Now that the spirit chi was thin, they could only use spiritual liquid to write it in advance and use it in battle. Fu Daozi was the only exception. He had been in seclusion for several years. When he broke through to the next realm, he also comprehended the Tao of Void Talisman Condensation Technique. Moreover, he could use it in a space where the spirit chi was thin. This made his strength comparable to the experienced 7th realm like Ao Feng even though he had just broken through. However, Li Mu tried to condense a talisman in the void according to the method taught by Fu Daozi, but he did not succeed. He tried several times in a row but it was still the same. Fu Daozi was puzzled and muttered, "That's impossible. I'm not surprised that Xian Jizi and the others can't learn it. You are so smart, why can't you condense a Fulu?" Li Mu tried a few more times and shook his head. "Perhaps I haven't fully comprehended the Fulu Dao." In terms of knowledge, no one in the cultivation world could compare to Li Mu. He knew how to write talismans, refine pills, refine weapons, array formations, cultivate the body, the demon Dao, the ghost Dao, the demon Dao, the Dao of dual cultivation. He could be said to be a walking encyclopedia in the cultivation world. However, except for the Tao of dual cultivation, he could not be said to be proficient in other aspects. He knew much more about the Fulu Dao than Fu Daozi, but Fu Daozi had been immersed in the Fulu Dao for 100 years in his life. He had his own understanding of the Fulu Dao, which was something that Li Mu could not obtain no matter how many heavenly books he read. Just like how Xiaoyu was the only one who could use the ability to curse the heavens, Li Mu, who had established his heart for the heavens and the earth, could directly control the power of the heavens and the earth. Similarly, the ability to condense talismans out of thin air was a unique ability of Talisman Daozi. From a certain point of view, this was a reward after being recognized by the heavens and the earth. Even though Li Mu had more than 10 heavenly books, he did not fully understand the operation of the heavens and the earth. For example, this kind of tailor-made magic power, the principle of the sky-stealing array, the refining method of the sun-shooting bow, and the door of the heavenly book were all mysteries to him. Since he could not learn it, Li Mu did not force it. Taking advantage of the fact that Ao Feng had not returned, he preached to the disciples of White Cloud Peak. Halfway through Li Mu's speech, 5 black dragons flew over from the distant sky. The disciples of White Cloud Mountain were already used to this. They all knew that the Black Dragon clan lived in White Cloud Mountain and seemed to have been subdued by the elders. During this period of time, they got along well with the disciples of White Cloud Mountain and had never had any conflicts. Remembering Ao Feng's surprise, Li Mu ended his preaching and went to a mountain at the back of the mountain. This was the place that Xian Jizi had set aside for the Black Dragon clan. Ao Feng and a few other dragons stood in front of a hall. Li Mu walked over and asked, "What's the surprise you were talking about?" Ao Feng pointed at a hall in front of him and gave Li Mu an extremely mysterious smile, saying, "You will know when you go in." He actually made it so mysterious. This greatly piqued Li Mu's curiosity. He impatiently released his divine sense to scan the area, but it was blocked outside the hall. Clearly this hall was sealed by Ao Feng with a formation. This made the surprise they wanted to give Li Mu even more mysterious. Li Mu did not say much. He walked to the front of the hall and pushed the door open. He was thinking about a pile of dazzling spiritual jades, but he only saw one person in the hall. No, it was a dragon. Li Mu looked at Qing Xen and said in surprise, "Qing Xen, what are you doing here?" When she was taken away by the Black Dragon clan's great elder and released from his cave, she was already in this hall. Qing Xen did not know where she was and what she would face next. She was worried and scared, and her mood was extremely low. Hearing this familiar voice, she suddenly raised her head and looked at Li Mu. After being stunned for a moment, she immediately said in surprise, "Lord Li, you came to save me." Li Mu was even more stunned. "What save you? What happened to you?" Qing Xen looked at Li Mu, and the endless grievances in her heart these past few days welled up. She flew into Li Mu's arms and cried, "Wu Wu, they said they were going to give me to a human. I thought I would never see you again." Li Mu looked at Qing Xian in a daze. In the next moment he understood what the surprise Ao Feng was talking about was. Li Mu's face darkened. He said in a low voice, "Ao Feng, come in." There was no movement outside. His voice was blocked inside the hall. Ao Feng was actually considerate enough to soundproof this place. Li Mu slapped out a palm and the array shattered. He said, "Ao Feng, come in." As his voice rang out, Ao Feng immediately walked in. He smiled and asked, "Lord Li, how is it? Are you satisfied with this gift? This is the most beautiful dragon girl in the South Sea." Although Qing Xan was beautiful, Li Mu wanted spiritual jades, not dragon girls. Li Mu glared at Ao Feng and asked, "Who do you think I am? A lecher?" This was not something obvious, but Ao Feng naturally did not dare to say so. He looked at Li Mu nervously and asked, "Is Lord Li not satisfied? Do you want me to get another one from the South Sea?" Chapter 636. Ao Feng couldn't figure out why Li Mu wasn't satisfied with the number one beauty of the Southern Sea Dragon race. She had the looks and the figure. If not, the Black Dragon race wouldn't have chosen her back then. Could it be that Li Mu liked someone with a big waist like Ao Manua? Judging from the women around him, his taste should be the same as that of the dragon race. However, Ao Feng soon noticed that something was amiss. The Southern Sea Dragoness was clinging to Li Mu's body, crying her eyes out. It didn't seem like they didn't know each other. Ao Feng was stunned and asked, You know each other?" Li Mu looked at him coldly and asked, "What do you think?" Ao Feng's face turned pale. This was truly a case of a flood rushing against the Dragon King's temple. How could they have known that Li Mu actually knew the Dragon Lady of the Southern Sea Dragon Palace? Moreover, their relationship seemed to be quite deep. After coming back to his senses, Ao Feng quickly said, I'm sorry. I didn't know you knew each other." Li Mu glared at him and said, "Go out first. I'll deal with you later." Ao Feng sighed in his heart and walked out of the hall. He wanted to give him a dragon lady to curry favor with him, but he didn't expect to make such a mistake. He was afraid that after this, his lifespan of 60 years would be further and further away from him. Qing Xen was still crying on Li Mu's chest. Li Mu asked helplessly, "Why didn't you tell me that you were threatened by the Black Dragon race?" Qing Xen felt wronged and said, "I didn't know that they listened to you and I didn't know that person was you." Li Mu patted her back and comforted her. It's okay. I'll help you vent your anger when we get out." He reached out and wiped away Qing Xian's tears. Her face was delicate and supple. She looked at Li Mu with a pitiful gaze. And when he looked at Qing Xian at a certain moment, Li Mu sensed that there was an aura in his body that was starting to become restless. At the same time, Qing Xian's body was also a little strange. Her breathing was a little chaotic, and her face started to turn slightly red. The two of them felt as if they were hugging each other tightly and even fusing into each other's bodies. Li Mu knew that this was the doing of the dragon marrow in their bodies. He and Qing Xan had both received Ao Qing's inheritance. As long as they were close to each other, the dragon marrow in their bodies would attract each other and produce this feeling. The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became awkward and ambiguous. Li Mu already felt his mouth dry up. He let go of Qing Xan and took her outside. He asked, "How do you want to deal with them?" The strength of the Black Dragon clan had been deeply imprinted in her mind since she was very young. Although she had Li Mu's support, she still shook her head and whispered, Forget it. Li Mu looked at her and said, "I'm here, don't be afraid." At this moment Ao Feng immediately said, "No matter what, it's our fault. Why don't the Black Dragon clan compensate her with 100,000 spiritual jades, and the Southern Sea Azure Dragon clan compensate her with another 100,000 spiritual jades? Qing Xian looked at Li Mu and nodded slightly. She said, okay. Li Mu didn't hold on to the Black Dragon clan. After all, Ao Feng did this to curry favor with him. Although the method was a bit clumsy, if he didn't let this matter go, it would be difficult for the Black Dragon clan to do anything for him in the future. Li Mu's face darkened. He said, don't act on your own in the future. If there's a next time, don't expect me to help you extend your lifespan. Li Mu's words meant that there was still hope. Ao Feng was overjoyed. He quickly said, no, if you like someone in the future, just tell us directly. This way there won't be any mistakes. Ao Feng and the others might have misunderstood him. Li Mu explained, I won't let you rob anyone. Just don't act on your own in the future. Ao Feng nodded. He looked at Qing Xian and asked Li Mu, then should we send her back to the Southern Sea? Li Mu waved his hand and said, no need. I'll bring her back to the divine capital later. Ao Feng left gloomily. He was happy to join Li Mu, but he didn't expect to lose 100,000 spiritual jades in the end. Who would have thought that other than the Empress of the Great Zhou, the Queen of Demons and the Master of the Ghost Region, he also had an ambiguous relationship with the Dragon Lady from the Southern Sea. Ao Feng even suspected that he was the reincarnation of the Black Dragon clan. No, even the Dragon King Ao Qing from 8,000 years ago was inferior to him. Li Mu flew out of the Black Dragon clan's mountain. Qing Xian followed Li Mu and asked, what should I do now? Li Mu said, you can return to the divine capital like before and continue to follow the Empress. If you want to go back to the Southern Sea, you can also go back. Although the time limit was not up yet, after being together for so long, no one used her as a mount anymore. Qing Xian shook her head decisively and said, I'm not going back. Li Mu said, then you can come back to the divine capital with me. He thought that the surprise Ao Feng gave him was an endless supply of spiritual jades. He didn't expect that he would give Qing Xian as a gift. Li Mu came here for nothing, so he could only take her back. In the palace, Zhou Yi saw Qing Xian and Li Mu appear together. She was stunned for a moment and asked suspiciously, why did you come back together? Li Mu saw her expression and knew what she was thinking. He immediately explained, Your Majesty, don't misunderstand. It's a long story. I'll explain it to you slowly. Li Mu first met Qing Xian in the Xin Kingdom because she didn't want to marry the Black Dragon clan. She secretly escaped from the Southern Sea, but unexpectedly fell into the hands of the Xin Kingdom people. In the end, she met Li Mu. This time, in order to please Li Mu, Ao Feng and the others forced the Southern Sea Dragon clan to hand Qing Xian over. The Southern Sea Dragon clan used her mother's illness as an excuse to trick her back to the Southern Sea and handed her over to Ao Feng and the others. Then Ao Feng brought her back to the White Cloud Mountain and prepared to give her to Li Mu as a gift. After going around in circles, she returned to the divine capital. Li Mu sipped his tea and said, that's what happened. I thought they would give me hundreds of thousands of spiritual jades. Who knew it was Qing Xian? Zhou Yi glanced at him and said, this shows that your image in the Black Dragon clan is like this. You should reflect on yourself. Why did they give you Qing Xian and not something else? How could Li Mu know the Dragon clan's way of thinking? Ao Feng's mistake was ultimately his fault. Unfortunately, Li Mu couldn't reason with the Empress. After sending Qing Xian to the Imperial Palace, he returned home. Qing Xian was temporarily living in the Imperial Palace, while Inxin was living in the Li Mansion. When Li Mu returned home, she was playing shuttlecock with Wanwan and Xiao Bai. Although the three of them were young, their cultivation was in the fifth realm. If they wanted to, they could make the shuttlecock never fall to the ground. Li Mu didn't know why they could play so happily. However, watching their graceful bodies flying up and down was also a kind of enjoyment. Li Mu looked at them for a while. Among the three women, Inxin was the strongest, followed by Wanwan. Xiao Bai, who had stepped into the door of cultivation earlier than Wanwan, had the lowest cultivation. This was not because Wanwan was more talented than her, but because Xiao Bai, as a member of the Heavenly Fox clan, had not resolved the knot in her heart and had not settled the karma. Even if she used elixirs, she could not step into the next realm. Li Mu looked at Xiao Bai with a tender expression on his face. She was the most sensible and obedient. She never caused trouble for Li Mu. She had always suppressed the hatred for her grandmother and her clan deep in her heart and never revealed it easily. She was always thinking about the hatred of her clan's extermination, but she always showed a smile in front of everyone. In the past, Xuanzong was a giant in the eyes of Li Mu and her. But not anymore. He could mobilize the experts of the Great Zhou, the Yao Kingdom, the Ghost Realm, the Yong Kingdom, the 5 Taoist sects, the 4 Buddhist sects and the Black Dragon clan. Even if Xuanzong had an expert of the 8th realm, he could not protect Xuanzong's disciple. Fu Daozi once wanted to fight Xuanzong, but Li Mu refused. He wanted to wait until he had the strength to fight against an 8th realm expert. Then he would fight Xuanzong on behalf of the Fulu school. But when Li Mu saw Xiao Bai smiling like a flower, he changed his mind at this moment. He did not want to wait any longer. Li Mu smiled and waved to Xiao Bai saying, "Xiao Bai, come here." Xiao Bai threw down the shuttlecock and quickly ran to his side. She asked with a smile, "Benefactor, what's the matter?" Li Mu patted her head and said, "Let's go. I'll take you to revenge." Chapter 637. Although Xuanzong only had 5 7th realms, Li Mu had to be fully prepared because of Tianjizi's existence. He didn't go there to start a war with Xuanzong, but to force them to hand over Qingqingzi so that Xiao Bai could take revenge. In the past, Li Mu didn't have the strength to make Xuanzong give in. Now Xuanzong didn't have the power to make Xuanzong give in. Other than Xiao Bai, he was the first to tell the Empress about this. Zhou didn't think too much and said, "I'll go with you." Li Mu shook his head and said, "With your Majesty's identity, it's not appropriate for you to show yourself in public. I can handle this matter." In the entire Zhou continent or even the 10 continents, she was the most distinguished person. How could the monarch of a country leave the capital to fight? Zhou frowned. After a while she said, "Then I'll let the 4 principals go with you." Li Mu continued to shake his head and said, "The 4 principals represent the Great Zhou. This is a personal matter between Xuanzong and me. The imperial court shouldn't interfere. Moreover, they have the responsibility of guarding Xin, Du and can't leave." Zhou thought for a while and said unhappily, "You don't want me to help you. Are you going to find that fox and your ghost sister?" Li Mu didn't comment. The Great Zhou was a human country, and the central imperial court of the Zhou continent was orthodox. Everything the imperial court did had to follow etiquette. However, the Yao country and the Ghost Realm were different. They had always been barbaric and violent. Naturally, they didn't have so many concerns. Looking at the Empress, who was obviously jealous, Li Mu held her hand and comforted her. "This time we're condemning Xuanzong. It's improper for the Empress of a country to follow. Next time if there's a chance like this, I'll definitely bring you." The Empress had a childish temper. She was only dissatisfied that Li Mu had asked for help from Phantom Princess and Su He, leaving her behind. Li Mu comforted her for a while and she felt better. After settling the matter with the Empress, Li Mu looked at Ling Long, who was busying herself at the table, and said, "Ling Long, you haven't returned home in a long time. You can accompany me to the state of Yong." Princess Ling Long had learned many ways to govern a country from the heavenly tomes. As the Yong kingdom was too small, it did not give her too much space to display her skills. It was only during this period of time in the Great Zhou that she was able to display all her skills, even forgetting the time. Only after Li Mu reminded her did she realize that she had not returned for a long time. For a moment, her heart was filled with thoughts of her hometown and family. She immediately stood up and said, Okay. Li Mu did not delay. After leaving the palace, he brought Ling Long and Xiao Bai to the state of Yong. In the Yong imperial palace, he and the Yong emperor had a private discussion. Not long after, the Yong emperor personally escorted him and Xiao Bai out of the imperial palace, saying, "Rest assured, Lord Li. I will definitely be there when the time comes." Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "Many thanks, Your Imperial Majesty." The Yong emperor smiled and returned the greeting, saying, "What are you saying, Lord Li? You have done a great favor for the state of Yong. This is also an opportunity for us to repay your kindness." After leaving the state of Yong, Li Mu went to the state of Liang, the state of Yu, the state of Jiang, and the state of Jing, respectively, visiting the Danding sect, the Ling formation sect, the southern sect, and the northern sect. When he left the northern sect master and the 2 grand elders looked at each other and sighed. If Xuanzong had known this would happen, why did he do it in the first place? Only one of the grand elders was puzzled, muttering, "Martial Uncle Tianjizi's divination skills are unparalleled in the world. He can even predict the future for a short period of time. Could it be that he didn't predict that Xuanzong would have this day?" The other grand elder shook his head and said, "The mysteries of heaven are hard to predict. Who can completely predict them? Those who scheme against the mysteries of heaven will eventually be schemed against by the mysteries of heaven. I don't know if Xuanzong will regret his original decision when the time comes." After leaving the northern sect, Li Mu took Xiaobai to the Buddhist sect's heart sect. He reminisced with Xuandu for 2 hours, then had a secret discussion with the venerable of the heart sect for 15 minutes before leaving the heart sect. Over the years, he had made use of the heavenly tomes to form many relationships. It was now time to use them. He didn't plan on fighting with Xuanzong. He wanted to avoid internal strife among the righteous path before officially clashing with the demonic path. He could only use strength to crush Xuanzong and force him to submit without expending a single soldier. After contacting the Taoist sects, only the 3 Buddhist sects of the Shin kingdom remained. When Li Mu and Xiaobai passed by the Shin kingdom, they could clearly feel that this kingdom was very different from the last time they visited. The Shin kingdom had a new ruler. Under Zhou Zhong's promotion, reforms were carried out from the bottom up. The legal system established was on the verge of perfection. If the Yong and Great Zhou were a combination of the rule of law and the rule of man, then the Shin kingdom was a pure rule of law. There was no distinction between close and distant, no distinction between high and low. Everything was decided by the law. In the Shin kingdom, Zhou Zhong pushed legalism's ideology to the extreme. In troubled times, severe punishments were used. When the heads of the Shin kingdom's criminals were piled up several zhang high outside the execution ground, the crime rate within the kingdom plummeted. In a very short period of time, everyone became fair and law-abiding citizens. Li Mu's destination was the Shin kingdom's new capital. On the Zhou continent, this kingdom's strength was once second only to the Great Zhou. Now, the one controlling it behind the scenes was actually a former minister of the Great Zhou. The Shin kingdom's court officials had also undergone a change of blood. They were led by Wei Peng and transferred over from the Great Zhou by Li Mu. The closer they got to the new capital, the more Li Mu could sense the changes in the Shin kingdom. Flying over the new capital, Li Mu's expression changed slightly. He could sense an abnormally powerful aura from below. This aura was so powerful that even he felt some fear. Obviously, there was a 7th realm expert in the Shin kingdom's new capital who was no weaker than him. Li Mu quickly locked onto this aura. Then he was pleasantly surprised. He held Xiaobai's hand and landed in the Shin kingdom's palace. They walked straight into a palace. In the palace, a middle-aged man sat cross-legged. He opened his eyes and looked at Li Mu. He said, "Lord Li, long time no see." Li Mu smiled and said, "Long time no see. Congratulations on your advancement, Lord Zhou." Zhou Zhong smiled and said, "Congratulations to you too." There was more than one way to advance to the 7th realm. For example, Li Mu and the Empress advanced by refining the Emperor Qi. After advancing, their strength was stronger than those who advanced through the sect's inheritance. However, people like Zhou Zhong and Fu Daozi did not accept the sect's inheritance and did not refine the Emperor Qi. Only those who advanced through their own strength could be considered true 7th realm experts. Their strength was incomparable to others. The school of legalism blazed a new path and was actually very powerful. The current Zhou Zhong was probably even stronger than Fu Daozi. After a brief moment of catching up, Li Mu went straight to the point and said, "I plan to go to the Xian sect to seek justice for Little White. Originally, I was here to invite the venerables of the 3 sections. Since Lord Zhou has also advanced, why don't we go to the Xian sect together? The scenery in the East Sea is much better than here." Without a doubt, Zhou Zhong, who had just advanced to the 7th realm of legalism, was grabbed by Li Mu just like that. As for the 3 supremacies of the Shin kingdom's Buddhist sect, Nirvana sect, Ku sect, and Yin sect, their soul blood was still in Li Mu's hands. After receiving the message, they immediately came to the Shin kingdom's imperial palace and expressed their obedience to Li Mu's arrangements. The Yong kingdom, the other 4 Taoist sects, and the 4 Buddhist sects were Li Mu's allies. Li Mu was also the first to visit. The Ghost Realm and the Yao Kingdom were Li Mu's backyard. Gathering the experts of these 2 places was just a matter of a word from Li Mu. After leaving the Shin Kingdom, he and Xiaobai first went to the Ghost Realm, which was the closest to them. Compared to last time, Fengdu City had undergone great changes. So he was using the power of the ghosts to enter seclusion and break through to the next realm. Within Fengdu City, the ghosts were gathered in a huge plaza. A stone tablet stood in the center of the plaza. The telekinesis in their bodies was attracted by the stone tablet and sank into it. Compared to the Great Zhou and the Yao Kingdom, Su He, as the Ghost Lord, had the strongest control over her territory. With the heavenly tomes in hand, all the cultivators of the Ghost Realm had absolute submission to her. In this aspect, even the Empress and Phantom Princess couldn't compare to her. Su He and Su Miao were both in seclusion. During this period of time, she was at a critical juncture in breaking through to the seventh realm. Li Mu didn't disturb her and went straight to the ghost servant. The ghost realm's current strength was stronger than the Yao kingdoms. The four ghost kings, the three elders of Yu and Ming, as well as the ghost servant who could directly contend with Xian Ming, were the peak experts on the surface. Even the great Zhou couldn't compare to them. Devil King and the others naturally obeyed Li Mu's orders. The three elders of Yu and Ming also had no other choice. After discussing the time with the ghost servant, Li Mu didn't delay and went to the Yao kingdom without stopping. In Fengdu City, the three elders of Yu and Ming had strange expressions. Bai sighed with emotion. I didn't expect that one day we would actually be able to fight Xuanzong. It's like a dream. For more than 1,000 years, Xuanzong of the Dao sect had always been the demon sect's #1 enemy. If it weren't for Xuanzong, they probably would have destroyed the 6 Dao sects long ago and seized the heavenly tomes of the 6 sects. When the three of them were still working for the demon sect, one of their ultimate goals was to fight Xuanzong. They didn't expect that they would be able to do what they couldn't do in the demon sect here. It had to be said that fate made fools of them. Those people in Xuanzong probably didn't expect that the first to attack their sect wasn't from the demon sect. Not long after, in the Thousand Fox Nation, Li Mu and Xiao Bai had just landed in the square in front of the palace when Xiao Bai ran toward the two figures in front of her. She happily said, "Sister Huanji, Sister Hu Lu." Ever since coming to the Thousand Fox Nation, Xiao Bai's mood had obviously improved a lot. The entire city was filled with the aura of her race. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was her heaven. Huanji and Hu Lu also doted on her very much. After hearing Li Mu's intentions, Huanji held Xiao Bai's hand and said, "Damn that Xuanzong bullying our family Xiao Bai like this. Sister will take you to take revenge." Li Mu asked, "Are you going too?" Huanji rolled her eyes and said, "Of course, this is our fox race's matter. How can I not go?" Li Mu didn't dissuade her like he dissuaded the Empress. After all, she was from the monster race and didn't have as many rules as the human race. After Huanji finished speaking, she thought of something and asked Li Mu, "Is Zhou going?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Not going." "Then I have to go even more." Huanji lightly snorted, then patted Xiao Bai's head and said, "Xiao Bai, now you should know who treats you better." Chapter 638. Phantom Princess was a big fox spirit, and Xiao Bai was a little fox spirit. They were both foxes and were naturally easy to get close to. For Xiao Bai, who had always been by Li Mu's side and had never met anyone of the same race after she grew up, the Thousand Fox Nation, which was full of fox spirits, was undoubtedly her paradise. After summoning the Blue Wolf King, Nine Heaven Snake King and Tianshan Bear King, the 4 demon kings gathered and discussed the plan with them. Li Mu looked at Xiao Bai, who had never smiled like this before. He walked over and patted her head, saying, "Why don't you stay with Sister Phantom Princess first and meet us later?" Xiao Bai grabbed Li Mu's wrist tightly without thinking and said, "I'll stay with my savior." Seeing Li Mu and Xiao Bai disappear into the horizon, Hu Jiao retracted the reluctance in her eyes. Then she realized something and asked Hu Lu in a low voice, "What do you think is so special about him that we like him so much?" Hu Lu looked at her and shook her head, saying, "Unfortunately, he only likes 2 foxes." Sigh. After sighing, Hu Lu looked at Hu Jiao and asked, "What are you sighing about?" Hu Jiao looked at her and asked, "What are you sighing about?" After leaving the Yao Nation, Li Mu returned to White Cloud Mountain. He had informed Xian Jizi earlier. At this moment, all the 7th realm cultivators of the Talisman Puppet sect had already gathered at the sect. Ao Feng had also received the news long ago. He rubbed his palms together in front of Li Mu and asked, "Do you want me to call the dragons of the other 3 seas over as well?" Li Mu glanced at him and asked, "Will they listen to you?" Ao Feng puffed out his chest and said, "As long as I say the word, they will definitely come." To be honest, the Black Dragon clan didn't have the authority to do so. Although the Silver Dragon, White Dragon and Azure Dragon clan weren't as strong as them, they wouldn't listen to their orders. However, even if they didn't give them face, they had to give face to Shou Yuan. He had already made a blunder once. Of course, he had to do everything he could to make up for it and change Li Mu's impression of them. Although the other 3 dragons had some conflicts with Li Mu and had lost a lot of spiritual jades to him, who would go against their lifespan. Ao Feng immediately ordered the other 3 elders to immediately head to the South Sea, North Sea and East Sea to gather the dragon tribes of the 4 seas in response to Li Mu's plan. After arranging everything, Li Mu stood at the highest peak of Mount Baiyun and gazed towards the east. The mountain breeze caused his clothes to flutter. Xiaobai was nestled beside him. The setting sun gilded their silhouettes, forming a beautiful picture. At the same time, far away on the shore of the East Sea, Tianjizi, who was sitting cross-legged in a deathly silent space, slowly opened his eyes. The expression on his face was as calm as ever as he softly said, "They're finally here, East Sea. Penglai Archipelago." It was said that there were 10 continents and 3 islands in the world. Everyone in the 10 continents knew that the 3 islands were illusory. One was called Fangzhong, one was called Kunlun, and one was called Penglai. They were all legendary immortal mountains. It was said that if one could find these 3 immortal islands, one would be able to peek into the secrets of longevity. The Penglai Archipelago wasn't the legendary immortal island. It was just that Xuanzong had named their sect with the same name. However, due to Xuanzong's reputation as the #1 sect of Taoism, the Penglai Archipelago had also been the holy land of cultivation in the hearts of the cultivators of the Zhou continent for the past 1,000 years. However, that was in the past. In the past year, Xuanzong's status and influence had taken a turn for the worse. The Great Zhou didn't allow them to establish their Tao arenas. The Demon Country and the Ghost Domain didn't allow Xuanzong's disciples to enter. The other 5 sects of the Orthodox Taoism no longer had any dealings with Xuanzong. In the past half a year, almost no news about Xuanzong had appeared in the cultivation world. Due to the difficulty of moving around outside, Xuanzong's disciples didn't go out anymore. Instead, most of them cultivated in seclusion within the sect. They would often think of the scene during the Taoism exchange meet. That was also the turning point of Xuanzong's fortune. If the sect had acted impartially back then, they definitely wouldn't have fallen to such a state today. This time, Xuanzong's disciples were still cultivating in the sect as usual. In the Tao Palace on the upside-down mountain peak at the highest level, Tao Chengzi, who had half white hair and half black hair, was sitting on a huge spiritual jade chair as he listened to the elders' reports. Because the Great Zhou didn't allow us to establish our Tao arenas, nor did they allow us to recruit disciples. Last month there were less than 5 new disciples. The Ghost Domain didn't allow us to enter, and the Demon Country didn't do business with Xuanzong. In the past 3 months, our disciples didn't have any soul power to cultivate, and the spiritual herbs were almost used up. We can't continue like this. Without new disciples and without cultivation resources, Xuanzong will definitely fall in a few years. Tao Chengzi's face darkened as he listened to the elders' reports. Coupled with his half-black and half-white hair, he looked very strange. In the past, Xuanzong never had to worry about talented disciples. Xuanzong's Tao arenas were all over the Zhou continent. Regardless of whether they were disciples of cultivation families or itinerant cultivators, they all fought tooth and nail to become Xuanzong's disciples. Every month, Xuanzong rejected at least 800 people if not 1,000. Now they couldn't even recruit disciples. Xuanzong was located on the shore of the East Sea. They needed to recruit disciples from the Great Zhou and obtain resources from the Ghost Domain and the Demon Country. Because of Li Mu, these 3 sects had directly cut off all ties with Xuanzong, making them a completely isolated sect. If this continued, Xuanzong would definitely fall at an extremely fast speed. Just as Xuanzong's elders were frowning and finding it difficult to speak, the gloomy Tao Chengzi suddenly raised his head. With a shocked expression, he flew out of the Tao Palace. A moment later, the other 3 7th realm cultivators seemed to have sensed something and flew out with Tao Chengzi. Far away in the sky, streaks of rainbows were shooting towards the direction of the Xian sect. Each streak of light exuded an extremely powerful aura. Seeing this, a chief's expression changed drastically. He said in fear, "Oh no, the demon sect is attacking." Tao Chengzi's pupils constricted. He said in a low voice, "No, it's not the demon sect." As the streaks of light got closer, someone finally saw what was happening inside the streaks of light. The fear on their faces gradually turned into shock and confusion. In the lead were more than 10 figures in Taoist robes. Apart from Xuanzong, they were the sect masters, grand elders and 7th realm cultivators of the 5 sections. Behind the 5 sects cultivators were 4 old monks standing on lotus platforms. Their bodies glowed faintly with golden light, and they also exuded 7th realm auras. Beside the 4 monks were 3 figures in imperial robes. They were also 7th realm cultivators. On the other side, 5 powerful demonic auras shot into the sky. Then, 7 figures appeared in a cloud of ghostly fog. However, this was not the most shocking thing. More than 10 black, green, silver and white dragons circled above the crowd. The aura of each dragon gave Xuanzong's cultivators an extreme sense of oppression. That was a 7th realm dragon. More than 10 7th realm cultivators descended on Xuanzong. At this moment, the seawater surged and the sky changed color. A terrifying aura enveloped them. Even though Xuanzong's sect protecting array was activated immediately, the Xuanzong cultivators in the array formation still felt a sense of suffocation. Especially when they saw the young man and woman at the front of the crowd, their expressions changed. Dao Qingzi clenched his teeth and squeezed out 2 words. Li Mu. Li Mu's expression was calm. He said calmly, Dao Qingzi, we meet again. The simple "we meet again" sounded extremely complicated in the ears of the Xuanzong cultivators. The last time they met, he was just a mere 5th realm disciple of Fulu school. Although he had a high status, he was so insignificant in front of Xuanzong. Even if he bullied him wantonly, Fulu school could only swallow it. In just 2 years, Xuanzong's status plummeted. The next time they met, the 5th realm cultivator was already a 7th realm cultivator. He brought dozens of 7th realm cultivators from the 5 Taoist sects, the 4 Buddhist sects, the Demon Nation, the Ghost Realm, and the Dragon Race to Xuanzong with an indomitable attitude. The current Li Mu and Xuanzong were just like Xuanzong and Li Mu in the past. It was karma and retribution. The Xuanzong disciples had also walked out of their cave abodes. They looked at the figures in the sky with dazed expressions. What happened? Aren't those the seniors of the other 5 sects? What are they doing in Xuanzong? Oh my God, so many cultivators. They're Buddhists, demons, ghosts, and even the dragon race. What happened? Among the crowd, Qing Qingzi, who had already finished his confinement, looked up at Li Mu and the girl beside him. His face instantly turned pale. Even with his 5th realm cultivation, he couldn't support his body and fell to the ground powerlessly. Dao Qingzi's face was also pale. Although Li Mu only greeted him casually, how could he not know the purpose of his trip to Xuanzong? 2 years ago, Xuanzong used his power to bully others and covered for Qing Qingzi. After causing a ruckus at Fulu school, he left with his tail between his legs. 2 years later, the Xuanzong was also the one being bullied and humiliated. But now the Xuanzong was the one being bullied. Among the dozens of cultivators, including Li Mu, there were several whose cultivation was unfathomable. Not to mention the dragon race. Even if all the cultivators of Xuanzong worked together, it would still be like throwing eggs at a rock. A trace of regret finally appeared on the white-haired half of Dao Qingzi's face, but the black half of his face became even more ferocious. He said sternly, other than the demon sect, you're the first one to lead people to attack Xuanzong in the past 1,000 years. Elixir Cauldron sect, Spiritual Array sect, South sect and North sect, do you know what you're doing? Do you want to kill your fellow disciples? Although his face was ferocious, anyone could see that Dao Qingzi was a bit cowardly at heart. After all, even if there were only half of the cultivators present today, they could still raze Xuanzong to the ground. Xuanzong's history of bullying others was gone forever. Li Mu looked at Dao Qingzi and said calmly, our sect has no intention of killing our fellow disciples. We're only here to seek justice. Are you going to hand over Qing Qingzi, or should I go and take him myself? It was the same request as 2 years ago, but Xuanzong could no longer treat it the same way as 2 years ago. Beside Dao Qingzi, another Grand Elder and several first seats were silent for a moment before speaking one after another. Senior brother, hand over Qing Qingzi. That's right, martial uncle. This is our fault. Don't continue to make mistakes. Martial uncle, isn't it enough that the sect has become like this? Not only did the cultivators of Xuanzong try to persuade them, but the disciples of the sect also had the same idea. Xuanzong was in the wrong, and the powerful sect in the past had fallen to its current state. It was reaping what it had sown. Qing Qingzi stood in the crowd and looked at the disdainful and hateful gazes of his fellow disciples. He only felt a chill run down his spine. He gathered all his spiritual power and wanted to escape, but a figure suddenly appeared beside him. It was Xuanzong's sect master Miao Yunzi. Sect master. Sect master is back. Sect master, please don't leave again. Xuanzong needs you. Seeing their former sect master, Xuanzong's disciples were all excited. Qing Qingzi trembled and said in a trembling voice, Sect master. Miao Yunzi looked at him and sighed. You have to learn to bear the consequences of your own mistakes. He waved his sleeve and disappeared with Qing Qingzi. When they reappeared, they were already outside the array formation. Dao Qingzi's expression changed. Miao Yunzi, what are you doing? Miao Yunzi took out a token and said, Martial uncle has ordered that Qing Qingzi has violated the sect rules and is now expelled from Xuanzong. From now on he will have nothing to do with Xuanzong. With that he disappeared, leaving only Qing Qingzi outside. Li Mu reached out and grabbed Qing Qingzi to his side. After sealing his spiritual power, Li Mu looked in the direction of Xuanzong. Although the result was inevitable, the process went so smoothly that it was beyond his expectations. 2 years ago, Tianjizi's attitude was still very firm. 2 years later he actually handed over Qing Qingzi. The contrast between before and after made Li Mu feel very confused. In order to absolutely crush the mysterious sect, he had brought almost all the forces he could mobilize to the mysterious sect. He had even brought a long-distance teleportation array with him. This was to prevent the Devil Dao from taking advantage of the situation, and they would not be able to provide support in time. Li Mu had never really experienced the strength of an 8th realm cultivator. If Tianjizi wholeheartedly protected Qing Qingzi, he was even prepared to face a Dao integration realm cultivator. Now he felt like he had been preparing for a long time and finally hit cotton. There was an indescribable discomfort in his heart. At this moment in the silent space, Miao Yunzi said in shock, "In just 2 years he has actually grown to such a level. He has gathered all the powerful cultivators of the entire Zhu continent around him. Even the dragon tribe of the 4 seas is under his command. Martial uncle, you have already predicted all of this. Did you already know that he would unite all these forces?" Tianjizi shook his head and said, "The will of the heavens is hard to predict. No one can predict everything. I only know that if we don't force him, when the calamity comes, the beings of the 10 continents won't have any power to resist. In this endless situation of death, he is the only chance of survival." Miao Yunzi murmured, "Taoism, Buddhists, the dragon tribe of the 4 seas, the demon nation, the ghost realm. All these forces have formed an alliance. Even the demonic Tao will have to retreat. What kind of catastrophe is it that requires everyone to unite to resist?" Tianjizi continued to shake his head. "The catastrophe is unpredictable. No one can predict it. But I have a hunch that that day will come soon." Chapter 639. Above the East Sea, the powerhouses of various forces stood in the air. Qing Qingzi had been handed over to Li Mu by Miao Yunzi, and Tianjizi had not appeared from the beginning to the end. Li Mu had made many preparations in advance, but they were useless. In Xuanzong, the elders and disciples also heaved a sigh of relief. At the most critical moment, the sect had pulled back from the brink. They had not made a mistake until the end. There were so many powerhouses outside, and they were enough to wipe out the demon path. How could Xuanzong deal with them? Only Dao Qingzi's face was filled with black and white qi. His hair turned completely white one moment and then completely black the next. His aura also fluctuated between strong and weak, and it became extremely unstable. Seeing this, a first seat's expression changed drastically and he exclaimed, "Oh no, martial uncle has turned into a demon." The path of cultivation was filled with all kinds of difficulties and dangers. Most cultivators would also encounter inner demons. At this moment, Dao Qingzi's appearance was clearly a sign of an inner demon's invasion. Back then it was he who had protected Qing Qingzi and saved Xuanzong's face for a while, but it caused the sect to sink deeper into a quagmire, unable to extricate itself. Although he had never mentioned it, it must have become a sharp thorn in his heart. Now Li Mu had led many powerhouses to force Xuanzong, and the sect master had ordered the sect master to hand over Qing Qingzi. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow to him, and it completely shattered his dignity. How could Grand Elder Dao Qingzi, who valued his face so much, tolerate this so easily? In the blink of an eye, Dao Qingzi's hair turned completely black. It seemed that time had reversed on his body, and his aura also rose to a very terrifying level. When Li Mu first fought with Dao Qingzi, his cultivation was only an ordinary 7th realm cultivator, which was similar to the sect masters and grand elders of the various sections. Just now, when he saw Dao Qingzi with half black and half white hair for the second time, his aura was comparable to Ao Feng's. When his hair turned completely black, the violent aura emitted from Dao Qingzi's body had surpassed Ao Feng's, even surpassing Fu Daozi's and Zhou Zhong's, and was close to Xian Ming's. Clearly he had already been possessed by the devil. 2 years ago, Li Mu had wreaked havoc in Xuanzong. He had defeated Dao Qingzi, a 7th level cultivator, in front of all the cultivators in the world. 2 years later, Li Mu was already a 7th level cultivator. He had led all the cultivators to force Xuanzong with overwhelming strength and completely destroyed Dao Qingzi's Taoist heart. To put it simply, he had a mental breakdown. The consequence of his Dao heart collapsing was that his body was now completely under the control of his inner demon. Dao Qingzi's body floated in the air. His hair was disheveled and fluttered in the wind. His body exuded an evil aura that was completely different from that of the orthodox Shenmen sect. He looked like a devil. Even Yu Ming's 3 elders, who came from the devil Dao, shuddered at the sight of Dao Qingzi. The Grand Elder of Xuanzong, the Taoist priest Qingzi, had completely lost his mind. His eyes were bloodshot, but his expression was calm. He looked at Li Mu without any ripples and said indifferently, "Junior, do you dare to fight with this old man again?" In front of the crowd, the ghost servant looked at Dao Qingzi with surprise. For cultivators, inner demons were a disaster, but it was also a good fortune. Most people who were invaded by inner demons would lose their minds and become monsters that only knew how to kill. However, there were also a few who could control inner demons and increase their strength greatly. Dao Qingzi was neither the former nor the latter. At this moment, his second consciousness, which was the inner demon, had taken control of his body. However, this inner demon didn't only know how to kill. Like Dao Qingzi, it had a deep obsession. Defeat Li Mu. Li Mu looked at Dao Qingzi, who seemed to have become a different person. He exuded an extreme pressure, and the battle intent in his heart surged wildly. The grudge between Fulu School and Xuanzong seemed to be between Xiaobai and Qing Qingzi, but it was actually between him and Dao Qingzi. No matter who won or lost in today's battle, the grudge between them would be completely resolved. A powerful aura also surged out of his body. He laughed and said, "Why wouldn't I dare?" Under the gaze of all the cultivators as well as all the disciples and elders of Xuanzong, 2 streaks of light flew out from the crowd. They collided violently and each retreated hundreds of feet. Li Mu's body was as strong as a dragon's, while Dao Qingzi formed a shield around him. This was a probing move, but neither of them had the upper hand. In the next moment, Dao Qingzi opened his mouth. A white light flew out of his body and quickly turned into a silver flying sword. The flying sword transformed into thousands of sword shadows behind him. They arranged themselves into a huge fan shape and then shot toward Li Mu. At the same time, countless streaks of blue light appeared behind Li Mu. Thousands of spear shadows flew out. In the void between the two, the spear shadows and sword shadows collided. Black cracks spread out like a spider web. What a powerful spell. Even space can't withstand it. Is this a battle between 7th realms? The disciples of Xuanzong were shocked, but there was also a hint of excitement in their eyes. Compared to this battle, their usual battles were no different from children playing house. They didn't realize that many of the 7th realm cultivators present couldn't hide the shock in their hearts when they saw the space shatter. This wasn't a battle between 7th realms. Which 7th realm cultivator here could shatter the void? The short battle between Li Mu and Dao Qingzi made them realize that even though they were all in the 7th realm, the gap between them could be so huge. Among the people present, perhaps only little White and Huanji's eyes were twinkling like little stars. In the sky, it was impossible to see the silhouettes of these 2 people. Only the light of spells could be seen flashing. The Xian house was famous for its variety of spells. However, in terms of the number of spells that the house knew, Li Mu did not lose out to the supreme elder of the house. In this short battle, he had broadened everyone's horizons. In this extremely short period of time, Li Mu had already realized that the demonized Dao Qingzi's Dharma power was no weaker than his. Furthermore, the number of Dharma spells and divine powers that Dao Qingzi knew was also the greatest among all the opponents that Li Mu had encountered. The 2 of them countered each other's moves with various divine powers. Of course, if Li Mu took out the sun-shooting bow, Dao Qingzi wouldn't be his opponent. However, the sun-shooting bow was like a bug in the 10 continents. It could kill people of the same level instantly. Li Mu couldn't afford to cheat in front of so many people, and Phantom Princess and Xiaobai were watching. Dao Qingzi wouldn't accept it either. Moreover, this was a fair battle. He didn't know how to cheat, nor did he need to. Li Mu reached out and a green light flashed in his hand. He held heaven breaking in his hand and chose to fight in close combat. Spells were his strong suit, and also Dao Qingzi's strong suit. The winner couldn't be decided in a short time. Li Mu disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind Dao Qingzi. The tip of his spear stabbed toward Dao Qingzi's back with lightning speed. Dao Qingzi's back was facing Li Mu. His body swayed inexplicably and Li Mu's spear missed. He shook the spear and several spear shadows appeared in the void and stabbed toward Dao Qingzi at the same time. Dao Qingzi's body swayed again and several afterimages appeared, dodging Li Mu's every attack. He slowly turned around and casually dodged Li Mu's close-range attacks. He said in a low voice, "I started cultivating when I was 5, refined my soul when I was 6, condensed my soul when I was 7 and condensed my soul when I was 8. I entered the Divine Power realm when I was 10, the Creation realm when I was 20, the Dongxian realm when I was 40, and the Transcendence realm when I was 80. I've cultivated for 100 years. How can I lose? His words were powerful, but everyone could hear the unwillingness in them. Almost all the 7th realm cultivators present could feel the unwillingness. To be able to cultivate to this level, they were all geniuses among geniuses, who didn't have arrogance higher than the sky. However, Dao Qingzi's arrogance was completely destroyed in front of a junior who was more than 100 years younger than him. With his 7th realm cultivation, he was forced to retreat pathetically when he faced Li Mu, who was at the 5th realm. Now, Li Mu had completely caught up to him, and he was completely humiliated in front of all the disciples of his sect. He desperately needed a victory. Only by defeating Li Mu could he eliminate the obsession and unwillingness in his heart. Dao Qingzi's words almost pierced the hearts of most of the cultivators present. They looked at the young figure who gave them endless pressure, and their feelings were slightly complicated. Especially the 3 elders of Yu and Ming, the 4 ghost kings, the Green Wolf King, and the supremacies of the 3 Buddhist sects of the Shin nation, who had been defeated by Li Mu. At this moment they even hoped that Dao Qingzi would win. Dao Qingzi was already the limit of their generation of cultivators. If even he was defeated by Li Mu, it meant that their generation had been surpassed by the younger generation. Their hundreds of years of hard work couldn't compare to a few years of casual cultivation. Huanji looked up and saw that the Heaven Lord of Illusion's gaze was a little strange. She snorted and asked, "Father, who do you want to win?" The Heaven Lord of Illusions immediately retracted his gaze and looked at Huanji. He smiled and said, "What are you asking?" "Of course I want my son-in-law to win." In the void above, the spear radiance shone brightly. Every spear that Li Mu stabbed didn't even touch the corner of Dao Qingzi's clothes. It was as if Dao Qingzi already knew where the spear would land before he stabbed. This was foresight. 7th realm cultivators already had the ability to foresee. However, in order to foresee the attacks of cultivators of the same level, one had to cultivate the art of divination to the peak. This was what Xuanzong cultivators were good at. If they could foresee the future one step ahead of their opponents, they would naturally be in an invincible position. Unfortunately, his opponent was Li Mu. Foreseeing the future was a mystique and also a Dao technique. It could only be used by borrowing the power of heaven and earth. Through cultivating the Henku 4 sentences, he already had the ability to directly control the power of heaven and earth. As long as their cultivation wasn't too much higher than his, they wouldn't be able to borrow the power of heaven and earth. Li Mu was the master of this world. If he didn't lend the power of heaven and earth, Dao Qingzi wouldn't be able to use a single Dao technique. Li Mu calmly stabbed his spear. A trace of confusion appeared on Dao Qingzi's face. The afterimages around him disappeared. A spear pierced through his shoulder and through his entire body. If the owner of the spear wanted to, the spear could pierce through his throat, heart, dantian, or any other part of his body. He looked down at the spear that pierced through his shoulder and then slowly looked up at Li Mu. He said in a low voice, "Domain. You've already comprehended a domain. No one below the Dao integration stage can defeat you. I've lost." After saying this, his hair quickly turned from black to white. His aura also instantly fell. In the end, he was only at the transcendent initial stage. Sigh. Ao Feng sighed. Then he realized something and murmured, "He won. Why am I sighing?" He didn't know why he wasn't happy about Li Mu's victory over Dao Qingzi. However, in order to make a good impression, Ao Feng still pretended to be happy. He said loudly, "Lord Li's powers are boundless. Old fogies of Xuanzong, is there anyone else who's not happy?" The outcome of the battle between Li Mu and Dao Qingzi had been decided. The dozens of powerful beings present didn't feel any joy from the victory. Instead, they all sighed in their hearts. Dao Qingzi's defeat represented the end of an era. The era that belonged to them had come to an end. And a new era was slowly rising. Li Mu pulled out the sky-splitting spear, turned around, and left. He didn't look back. He threw Qingzi back into the flask heaven dimension. He held Xiaobai in one hand and Huanji in the other and disappeared from everyone's sight. The powerful beings also left. Xuanzong. Qing Xuanzi's face was pale. After a long while, he withdrew his gaze from the void. He recalled his conflict with Li Mu, and a wry smile appeared on his face. At this moment, the hatred in his heart toward Li Mu suddenly disappeared without a trace. With their current identities, status, and strength, he couldn't and didn't dare to hate him anymore. That figure holding the spear was deeply engraved in Qing Xuanzi's heart. It was also engraved in the hearts of all Xuanzong disciples. They would never be able to forget it. Chapter 640. Yangqiu County. In the northwest direction of the county, there were a few hills in the lush mountains. These were the tombs of Xiao Bai's grandmother and her clansmen. When they left Yangqiu County, Li Mu and Xiao Bai buried them with their own hands. Xiao Bai knelt in front of the tombs with tears in her eyes. She sobbed and said, "Grandma, big sister Yingying, big sister Yanyan, Xiao Bai has avenged you." Qing Qingzi's body was lying in front of the tombs. He had committed suicide. After being abandoned by Xuanzong, he knew that he would not have a good ending, so he dispersed his soul. Li Mu flicked his finger and a fireball landed on his body. The flames rose instantly and were extinguished in an instant. A gust of wind blew and everything returned to dust. The grudges between Xiao Bai and Qing Qingzi, as well as the grudges between Li Mu and Xuanzong, were resolved. Li Mu stayed here with Xiao Bai for a few hours before returning to his ancestral home in Yangqiu County. The place that was once extremely familiar to him was now completely different. The shops on the street had changed several times, and the roads that he used to patrol had become unfamiliar. It was no longer the Yangqiu County that Li Mu was familiar with. The sky was already bright. Li Mu looked at Xiao Bai, who was still sleeping soundly beside him, and a smile appeared on his face. 6 snow-white fluffy tails were hanging by the bed. She had taken her revenge, and the only thing that bothered her was put down. Last night, she had silently advanced in her sleep. Xiao Bai's talent was not bad. Under Li Mu's nourishment, she had never lacked any cultivation resources. The medicinal power in her body had accumulated, and her dermic powers were far superior to ordinary dermic powers. She should have advanced to the 6th realm like Lu Hanyan and Li Qin, but because of the unresolved knot in her heart, her cultivation had stagnated for a long time. The knot in Xiao Bai's heart had been untied, and Li Mu had also put down a huge burden in his heart. To treat the number 1 sect in the world as an enemy required a great deal of courage. In order to be able to speak with Xuanzong on an equal footing one day, Li Mu had made countless efforts in the past 2 years. He had already returned the humiliation of that day in double. From now on, he and Xuanzong would mind their own business. He would go his own way and they would go their own way. The glory of Xuanzong is a thing of the past. In the near future, Fulu School will replace it. In the coming days, Li Mu needed to focus all of his attention on the demonic path. During this time, although the demonic path had been quiet, Li Mu could already feel the calm before the storm. When the demonic path ancestors gathered together, the calamity of the righteous path would also arrive. Deep in the South Sea, Ghost Island. Aside from the people of the demon sect, no one knew the location of Ghost Island. It was not that the island was remote, but that the location of Ghost Island was not fixed. To be exact, it was a floating island floating in the South Sea. For hundreds and thousands of years, it had been wandering aimlessly. Only through the mutual sensing between the tokens of the demonic path could the location of the island be found. Xian Ming sat up in his sarcophagus on the tower in the center of the island. He lowered his voice and said, "Buddha, Taoism, monster, ghost, dragon tribe? For thousands of years, no one has ever united them. Even Ao Qing couldn't do it. What's so special about him?" The third ancestor slowly said, "In the past 10,000 years, he is indeed the biggest anomaly we have encountered." Xian Ming said regretfully, "Unfortunately, he did not flatten Xuanzong. This will save us a lot of trouble in the future." The third ancestor said, "He is a smart man, but Tianjizi is not that simple. Li Mu has united many forces. The situation in the Zhu continent is no longer under our control. Order all disciples to stop all actions and wait for the right opportunity." One order after another silently spread out from Ghost Island. Shin, do. Ever since Li Mu brought everyone to Xuanzong for a stroll, the entire Zhu continent seemed to have settled down. Earlier, there were still traces of the demonic path in the various counties and southern countries of the Great Zhou. Overnight, they seemed to have evaporated into thin air, disappearing without a trace. Without a doubt, the forces gathered by Li Mu this time had intimidated the demonic path. Although the demonic path's 3 ancestors and Xian Ming were on Ghost Island, the number of core experts was far less than what Li Mu had gathered that day. After realizing the difference in strength, they did not dare to be too active on the continent. In the entire Zhu continent, the only place that was not so peaceful was the Shin nation. The conflicts between the tribes in Yenzhou were getting more and more intense. The flames of war spread to the borders of the Shin nation, resulting in a lot of bloodshed and even deaths. Although the Xin nation had sent troops to suppress the conflicts would not subside in a short time. Li Mu had been diligently cultivating in Xin these days. The existence of the first and second ancestors of the demonic path made him uneasy. After the dual cultivation, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were exhausted and fell asleep. Li Mu was still full of energy. His body was comparable to that of the Dragon Clan. He could only return to his study, take out 2 pieces of top-grade spiritual jade, and cultivate with them in his hands. Creak. At a certain moment, the study's door suddenly opened and then slowly closed. 2 figures slipped into the room. Li Mu opened his eyes and asked, "Why aren't you sleeping? What are you doing here?" Xiao Bai blushed and said, "I want to sleep with Benefactor." Wan continued, "I want to sleep with Xiao Bai." Xiao Bai wanted to sleep with Li Mu, and Wan wanted to sleep with Xiao Bai. However, when they slept, they lay on either side of Li Mu. Li Mu originally wanted to cultivate all night, but now he could only sleep with them. Li Mu could not sleep well with the fragrance of girls on both sides. It was all because of that damned Ao Qing's inheritance that his resistance to beauty was greatly reduced. If he didn't recite the clear heart art, even little by Wan couldn't resist his willpower. Li Mu restrained the impulse in his heart. After an unknown period of time, Xiao Bai's voice sounded in his ear. "Benefactor." "Huh?" Xiao Bai leaned close to Li Mu's ear and whispered, "Benefactor, I want to tell you something." Li Mu asked, "What is it?" Xiao Bai lowered her voice and said softly, "Sister Wan and I are no longer children." It was unknown if the fox race was born to do this, but after saying this, the usually innocent and cute Xiao Bai actually stuck out her small tongue and licked Li Mu's earlobe. At the same time, on the other side, Wan's body also leaned over. In the past month, Li Mu had roughly experienced Ao Qing's happiness. Ever since Wan and Xiao Bai Ting Xn, who had never been obedient, sneaked into his room one night. That night, Li Mu learned for the first time how clingy the snake demon was. And one night, when Ting Xian encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation and came to ask Li Mu for advice on cultivation problems, she happened to bump into Ting Xian, who had sneaked into Li Mu's room. The double happiness became double happiness. Finally, his body, which was as strong as a dragon's, could not take it anymore. The Tao of dual cultivation also had to be controlled. Cultivating without restrictions would instead be counterproductive. Li Mu planned to rest for a few days and return to White Cloud Mountain to see the progress of his disciples' cultivation. The spirit jades plundered from the Four Seas dragon race made Fulu School the richest sect in the cultivation world. Even if the 5 Taoist sects and the 3 Buddhist sects were added together, they were still far from White Cloud Mountain's spirit jades. This was because the Four Seas dragon race was just too rich. In the smaller continents, the resources were divided among countless factions and sections. There was not much left in each person's hands. However, the largest ocean was the dragon race's territory. There were only 100 or so dragon race members in the Four Seas. They monopolized the ocean's resources. Ordinary people could not imagine how deep their foundation was. The various sects did not lack geniuses, but their resources were extremely limited. The sect had 2 powerhouses at the peak of the Blessed Realm, but there was only one portion of resources that could allow a 5th realm cultivator to enter the 6th realm. This was the most important reason that limited the number of powerhouses in each sect. The problem Fulu School was facing now was that the sect had 2 powerhouses at the peak of the Blessed Realm, but there were 10 portions of resources that could allow a 5th realm cultivator to enter the 6th realm. The disciples who could not obtain too many resources in the past did not need to fight for them. Everyone had a share. This caused the disciples who broke through to the next realm to spring up like bamboo shoots after a rain in the past month. Although 7th realm powerhouses were not made from spirit jades, there were a few elders who were stuck at the peak of the Blessed Realm who broke through with the help of spirit jades. The number of 6th realm powerhouses in Fulu School quickly increased to 11. This number was still a little lacking compared to the current Xuanzong. However, Fulu School had already surpassed Xuanzong in terms of the number of 7th realm powerhouses. With almost endless resources, it was only a matter of time before the sect's core strength surpassed Xuanzong's. However, spirit jades could increase the sect's overall strength, but they could not increase the sect's peak combat strength. Breaking through to the 7th realm either relied on legacies or emperor chi. There were shortcuts. However, how could one break through to the 8th realm? Fulu School once had a 9th realm powerhouse, but at that time the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was not as thin as it was today. One could reach the 9th realm through normal cultivation. The same method could no longer be used today. In today's world, the only ones who knew about the cultivation method of the eighth realm were probably Xuanzong and the demonic path. However, it was clear that neither Xuanzong nor the demonic path would reveal it to Li Mu. In order to face the danger that could come at any time, Li Mu stayed at White Cloud Mountain for 3 days before heading to the Yao Nation to discuss the Tao of dual cultivation with Huanji. At the same time in Yenzhou, on a vast plain, 2 large tribes were fighting fiercely. Tens of thousands of soldiers had died on the battlefield. The entire plain was covered in mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The land that stretched as far as the eye could see was dyed dark red by blood. Under the plain, 10,000 feet deep, a sinister man sat cross-legged. Streaks of baleful qi were attracted from the battlefield above and entered his body. The more intense the battle above was, the more baleful qi flowed into the ground. It gradually formed a black cocoon that enveloped the sinister man. Jianghu continent. Jianghu continent was located overseas, far away from the other continents. It did not have much interaction with the other continents. Unlike the divided Zhou continent, Jianghu continent had hundreds of millions of people, but only one unified country, the Ying nation. A few months ago, a sudden plague swept through the Ying kingdom. Hundreds of thousands of people had already died from the plague, and the number was still increasing. The cultivators of the Ying continent had tried to save them, but no matter if it was pills or talismans, none of them had any effect on the plague. More and more people died in their homes, on the streets and everywhere else. The air above Jianghu continent was filled with a thick baleful qi. Even if cultivators encountered it, they would avoid it. No one knew that at the center of this deathly aura, there was a gray figure floating in the air. His eyes had no pupils and were completely gray. An ancient book page floated above his head, and the deathly aura in the distance was attracted by the book page and slowly gathered towards this place. Chapter 641. Ghost Realm, Fengdu City. Li Mu and Illusion Princess floated in the air. The 3 elders of Yu and Ming, the 4 ghost kings, and the ghost servant stood behind them, looking at a huge fog vortex in the city. Li Mu and Illusion Princess were cultivating in the Demon Nation when they suddenly received a message from the ghost servant that something strange had happened in Fengdu City. He immediately rushed to the ghost realm with Illusion Princess. In Fengdu City, the fog vortex gathered all the yin qi within 1,000 miles and sucked it into the vortex. Under the huge fog vortex, a powerful aura was brewing. It wasn't the first time Li Mu felt this aura, so he naturally knew what it meant. With the combined efforts of the entire ghost realm, Suhi was taking the crucial step. Soon, the Empress of the Great Zhou, the Queen of 10,000 Demons, and the Master of the Ghost Realm would all become 7th Realm experts. Li Mu and the others waited for several hours. In the fog vortex, Suhi's aura finally reached a peak. Then, it broke through a certain barrier. The vortex gradually dissipated and a figure walked out. At this moment, the 4 ghost kings and Feng Yi, who only had a soul body, suddenly felt a sense of fear from the depths of their hearts. Facing the figure that walked out, they couldn't suppress the desire to submit in their hearts. They couldn't help but bow, and even their heads were lowered. In Fengdu City, countless ghost cultivators had the same feeling. They all knelt on the ground and kowtowed in a certain direction. Outside Fengdu City, the wandering ghosts all stopped in their tracks. Then they lined up in neat rows and slowly floated towards Fengdu City. The ghost servant knelt on one knee and said respectfully, "Congratulations, Ghost Lord." When the 4 ghost kings and by 1 saw this, they knelt down as well. Although by 2 and by 3 weren't ghost cultivators and didn't cultivate ghost Dao techniques, they were too embarrassed to remain standing when everyone had knelt down. They could only kneel down and say respectfully, "Congratulations, Ghost Lord." Suhi's voice was gentle as she said, "Rise." Then she slowly walked in front of Li Mu and looked at Illusion Princess. Illusion Princess also puffed out her chest and looked back at her, not to be outdone. Suhi was the first to speak. "I've often heard him mention it. Now that I've seen it with my own eyes, the Queen of the 10,000 Demons is indeed charming." For some reason, although Illusion Princess didn't like Zhou Yi, she didn't reject the girl in front of her. She smiled and said, "Ghost Lord sister, you're too kind. You're also very beautiful." Suhi bowed to her and said softly, "Suhi." Huanji also returned the greeting and smiled, "Huanji." Seeing the 2 of them complimenting each other and introducing themselves, Li Mu was momentarily stunned. Phantom Princess and the Empress were like fire and water. They were always at loggerheads with each other. However, she and Suhi got along very well. This was out of Li Mu's expectations. Originally this time if she didn't insist on coming, Li Mu planned to go to the ghost realm alone. With her by his side he felt uneasy. Only now did he feel relieved. Each of them had a noble status and millions of people under them. If they were all like Illusion Princess and the Empress, Li Mu would be stuck in the middle. Who knew how uncomfortable it would be? After Su He advanced, countless wandering souls began to gather outside Fengdu City. Those were the wandering souls of the ghost realm welcoming their king. At first they were just low-level wandering souls. Gradually, 5th and 6th level wandering souls began to appear. Among the group of wandering souls, there were existences whose auras weren't weaker than the 7th level. The ghost realm was a treasure trove that hadn't been fully explored yet. Only when she advanced to the 7th level could she completely control this treasure trove. In the next few days, Li Mu accompanied Su He and traveled through the entire ghost realm. The corpses of giant beasts that had been dead for tens of thousands of years in the ghost realm were the nests of wandering souls. The strongest wandering souls existed there. In 5 days, Li Mu and Su He found more than 10 7th level wandering souls. Su He subdued all of them. It was also in these few days that Li Mu and Su He noticed some clues. In the ghost realm, the number of souls suddenly increased dramatically. Moreover, they were all Yin spirits that had just died. As the master of the ghost realm, Su He was the clearest about the situation in the ghost realm. Wandering souls didn't have intelligence. Ghost cultivators also had the characteristics of ghost cultivators. The number of these two wouldn't change too much in a short time. If the number of Yin spirits in a place increased dramatically in a short time, there was only one possibility. That place had many people who died in a short time. And those Yin spirits couldn't all come to the ghost realm. Therefore, the true number of people who died in the places where these Yin spirits were was far more than this number. The two of them traced back to the source and finally found the source of these Yin spirits. Yanzhou. The conflict at the border of the Shin nation let Li Mu know that Yanzhou wasn't peaceful recently. However, after personal investigation he found out that the entire Yanzhou had completely turned into a battlefield. This was a large-scale war. Almost all the tribes and nations in Yanzhou participated in it. Millions of Yanzhou people died in the war. The souls of the dead even drifted to the ghost realm. Before the Great Zhou was founded, the situation in Zhou province was also like this. It wasn't until Emperor Taizu founded the Great Zhou that the Zhou continent was unified. During the reigns of Emperor Wu, Emperor Wen, and the Empress, the Great Zhou was cleared of internal and external troubles. Only then did the Zhou continent achieve its current stability. If it weren't for this, the Zhou continent would be no different from Yanzhou now. Although Li Mu couldn't stand the sight of corpses lying everywhere, this situation wasn't something that could be changed by one person or one nation. The only thing he could do was to protect the Zhou continent, protect the Yao nation, and protect the ghost realm. He didn't want them to follow in Yanzhou's footsteps. After figuring out the source of the Yin spirits, Li Mu and Su He left hand in hand. As they were leaving, he vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. He turned around to take a look but still found nothing. Su He noticed Li Mu's strange behavior and asked, "What's wrong?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Nothing. Let's go." However, just as they were about to return to the ghost realm, Li Mu suddenly turned back. At that moment he finally realized what was wrong. Evil spirit. Wherever Li Mu and Su He went, there was no trace of evil spirit in the various battlefields in Yanzhou. This was extremely illogical. Battlefields were places of great evil. Evil spirit gathered here. Without external interference, it wouldn't dissipate even after hundreds of years. But in the various battlefields in Yanzhou millions of people died, and there wasn't even a trace of evil spirit. There was only one possibility. The evil spirit in all the battlefields in Yanzhou had been taken away by someone. Li Mu had once sneaked into the ghost island and knew the cultivation methods of the demonic cultivators. In addition to the soul and blood essence of humans, evil spirit, death spirit, and so on were also one of their cultivation methods. Those who cultivated these paths often liked to use ancient battlefields or ancient tombs as cultivation places. These places were full of evil spirit and death spirit, which was the most suitable for them to cultivate. Soon Li Mu realized something. The inexplicable intercontinental war in Yanzhou, the deaths of millions of people, and the disappearance of the evil spirit. Combined with these things, an answer was on the verge of being revealed. Someone instigated an intercontinental war in Yanzhou and used the evil spirit piled up by millions of people to cultivate. To need so much evil spirit, this person's cultivation was definitely not Dong Xian. At the very least, he was at the peak of the transcendence realm like Xian Ming. He wanted to use this to break through to the 8th realm. And Yanzhou was the location of another headquarters of the demonic cultivators. Only the demonic cultivators could do such a thing. Chapter 642. Returning to the ghost realm with Su He, Li Mu had a lot on his mind. He had pondered over the matter of Yanzhou for a long time. He informed everyone that from now on, they had to be extremely vigilant. They didn't need to worry about spirit jades, and they had to be prepared to use the ultra-long-distance transmission array at any time. The demonic path's relative strength was at its peak in the last 10,000 years. Once they took action, they would be unstoppable. As for himself, he had to personally go to the Jianghu continent to investigate. That was the last headquarters of the demonic path. If the demonic path had set up their headquarters in Yanzhou for this purpose, then the Jianghu continent would have already become a purgatory on Earth. With the Earth-shrinking technique, Li Mu could travel through the 10 continents and 3 islands in a day. From the Ghost Realm to the Jianghu continent, crossing the West Sea would only take a few hours. The demonic path spies were everywhere. If Li Mu left with great fanfare, he would not be able to hide it from them. This trip to the Jianghu continent was a secret investigation. In order to avoid alerting the enemy, Li Mu didn't bring anyone. He quietly left the Ghost Realm alone and headed west from the West Sea. When he arrived at the Jianghu continent, what Li Mu saw was a plague that had swept through the entire continent. Countless people died in the plague. The Jianghu continent's only large country, the Ying country, did nothing, allowing its people to be swallowed up by the plague. Li Mu knew that the Ying country had long been controlled by the demonic path. Including the royal family, all the officials in the court were part of the demonic path. This was the result they wanted to see. In the Jianghu continent, Li Mu also discovered something unusual. In the first city he came to, the number of people who died was in the tens of thousands. But in the entire city there wasn't much death energy. The small amount of death energy was slowly rising, floating towards the sky. Under normal circumstances, death energy would gather in low-lying areas, affecting the soil there, causing it to become barren and gradually become a place to raise corpses. The death energy didn't fall but instead rose. There must be something strange about it. Li Mu hid his figure and followed the death energy slowly rising, moving in a certain direction. Along the way, Li Mu had already discovered that death chi was rising from all over the cave-gathering continent, converging in the same direction. Until 2 hours later, a huge cloud of death chi appeared in front of Li Mu's eyes. In the entire Jianghu continent, hundreds of thousands of people who had died from the epidemic had gathered their death chi here, causing the originally formless death chi to become corporeal. Li Mu's eyes flashed with a golden light. His gaze pierced through the clouds of death chi, and he saw a gray-robed figure sitting cross-legged in the clouds. This person was currently absorbing the death chi in the clouds, and above his head was a simple and unadorned page. It was obvious that the death chi in the gathering cave continent was attracted by this page. Heavenly Book. When he saw the page, Li Mu was shocked. At this moment, the gray-clothed man in the death aura seemed to have sensed something. He suddenly opened his eyes and turned to look in Li Mu's direction. There were no pupils in his eyes, only a gray-white color. His entire person was filled with a strange feeling. In the next moment, the gray-clothed man's figure vanished from the clouds. When he reappeared, he was 1,000 feet away from Li Mu. He stared at Li Mu with his gray-white eyes, and shock appeared in his eyes as he said, "It's you." Li Mu wasn't curious that this person would recognize him. To possess a heavenly book and have such a cultivation, he must be a top powerhouse of the demonic path. He might even be one of the first or second ancestors. As the gray-clothed man's voice fell, he turned into a beam of light and fled into the distance. This person's understanding of Li Mu was clearly deeper than Li Mu had expected. He and the demonic path were originally like fire and water, and both of them wanted to obtain the other's heavenly book. If the demonic path ancestors saw Li Mu, they would do everything in their power to capture him, so how could they flee without fighting? The only possibility was that this person knew that he was no match for Li Mu. With the sun-shooting bow in hand, Li Mu was invincible below the 8th realm. As long as this person hadn't reached the 8th realm, he didn't have the strength to contend with Li Mu. He was clearly aware of this point, so he didn't linger in the battle. Instead he chose to flee. But how could Li Mu let him do as he wished? This person's identity was likely to be one of the demonic path ancestors, and one that hadn't advanced yet. If Lin Ming didn't take advantage of this opportunity to deal with him, there would be even greater trouble in the future. The sun-shooting bow instantly appeared in Li Mu's hand. Li Mu immediately shot out an arrow that contained 10% of his magic power. Although the sun-shooting bow was the most powerful when shooting out an arrow at full strength, unless Li Mu had the confidence to kill this person with a single arrow, he had to be extremely careful when shooting. First, he would use a less powerful arrow to exhaust himself, and at the same time quickly restore his cultivation. This way he would have a decent endurance and wouldn't fall into a state of emptiness after shooting out an arrow, becoming a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Swish. With Li Mu's current cultivation, even an arrow that only contained 10% of his magic power directly pierced through space, creating a spatial crack. It arrived behind the gray-robed person in the blink of an eye. This arrow was enough to kill a regular 7th-level cultivator. Just as the arrow was about to pierce through the back of the dark-robed person's heart, he suddenly turned around and punched out. Boom! His fist was wrapped in a deathly aura. When it collided with the arrow, the gray-robed person flew back 1,000 feet. However, the arrow directly collapsed into specks of light and vanished into the surroundings. The gray-robed person was unharmed after shattering the arrow from the sun-shooting bow with a single punch. The gray-robed person clearly realized something. He looked at Li Mu from several thousand feet away and pursed his lips. He said, "What? You don't dare to use your full strength?" Even Xian Ming would have been injured if he received Li Mu's arrow, but it didn't cause any harm to the gray-robed person. His cultivation was much stronger than Xian Ming's. He was probably only a step away from the 8th level. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "Which ancestor of the demonic way are you?" The gray-robed person smiled faintly and said, "You can call me second ancestor or you can call me Yuan Luo." Li Mu had seen Yuan Luo's name in Ao Qing's diary. He was Ao Qing's old rival from 8,000 years ago. Before Ao Qing's lifespan ended, they still couldn't determine a victor. As expected, he was one of the 2 ancestors of the demonic way that Li Mu had never met. Yuan Luo's cultivation had already reached this level. Once he completely refined the deathly aura, he would definitely step into the way integration stage. Together with the first ancestor of the demonic way would be invincible. Li Mu couldn't just watch this happen. Against such an opponent, it was useless to waste his energy. He put away the sun-shooting bow and a long spear appeared in his hand. The gray-robed person looked at the long spear in Li Mu's hand and sighed. "Ao Qing, you have indeed been an unforgettable opponent for me over the past 10,000 years. 8,000 years ago, the 2 of us couldn't determine a victor. I hope you won't disappoint me when we fight again today." As soon as he said that, a long gray spear condensed in his hand. Li Mu gripped the heaven-breaking spear tightly and said coldly, "You won't be disappointed." As soon as he said that, he and Yuan Luo disappeared and reappeared at the same time. Clang! The tips of the spears collided with an ear-piercing sound. A black spot suddenly appeared where the tips of the spears met before spreading into countless black lines. The space there shattered like a mirror. The 2 of them tacitly didn't choose to fight with their abilities. At their level of cultivation, even the most ordinary move would have the power to destroy heaven and earth after being entwined with the power of heaven and earth. In the void, the 2 of them were difficult to capture. The only thing that could be seen was the intertwining green and gray light and the shattering of space. Clang! The green and gray light collided once again. Yuan Luo was sent flying hundreds of meters away. An abnormal red color appeared on his face as he forcefully swallowed a mouthful of blood essence that was about to spit out. A trace of doubt appeared on his face before he disappeared again. Clang! After another attack, Yuan Luo was sent flying hundreds of meters away again. He looked at Li Mu, who was still standing on the same spot. The doubt on his face finally turned into shock. Something wasn't right. His true cultivation was higher than this person's. In such a head-on clash, he should have the absolute upper hand. But why was he the one who was injured every time he was sent flying? Even if this person had battle experience that wasn't inferior to his, there shouldn't be a situation where he was suppressed despite his higher cultivation. After thinking about it, Yuan Luo finally realized the reason. Every time their artifacts collided, Li Mu's spear would be entwined with the power of heaven and earth. However, the power of heaven and earth entwined around his spear would always strangely disappear when it got close to Li Mu. This was equivalent to using his powers to fight against the power of heaven and earth. How could he possibly have the upper hand? Yuan Luo was an old monster with 10,000 years of experience. In an instant he figured out the problem. He said in shock, "Domain. You're only at the 7th level. How can you control the power of a domain? Even with his 10,000 years of experience, he couldn't hide the shock in his heart when he realized this. The power of a domain could only be controlled after one's cultivation reached the 8th level. Controlling the power of heaven and earth was the biggest difference between the 7th level and the 8th level, as well as between the Transcendence realm and the Unification path. In his 10,000 years of experience, Yuan Luo had never seen anyone who could control the power of a domain at the 7th level. His 10,000 years of common sense had been shattered by Li Mu today. Li Mu controlled the power of a domain. Before Yuan Luo's cultivation reached the 8th level, it was impossible for him to defeat Li Mu. No one at the 7th level could defeat Li Mu either. In a battle of techniques with the same cultivation level, Li Mu was in an invincible position right from the start. After realizing this, Yuan Luo didn't want to continue fighting and immediately teleported away. How could Li Mu let him go? He took a step forward and used ground shrink. When he appeared again, he was already in front of Yuan Luo. However, at this moment, Yuan Luo suddenly raised his head, and a strange smile appeared on his face. This smile caused Li Mu to feel a chill in his heart. At this moment, Li Mu suddenly sensed that the power of space in a city in front of him had started to become extremely active. Li Mu wasn't unfamiliar with this situation. This was the appearance of an ultra-long-distance teleportation formation when it was activated. A pillar of light appeared in the center of the city. The next moment, a figure walked out of the pillar of light. It was an old man who looked like a skeleton. There didn't seem to be any flesh on his body. It was like a piece of dried human skin stuck to his bones. There were no eyes in his eye sockets, only 2 balls of ghostly fire flickering. When those 2 balls of ghostly fire looked in Li Mu's direction, Li Mu's body suddenly turned cold. It was as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Chapter 643. After the violent spatial fluctuations, the skeletal old man that appeared gave Li Mu an extremely dangerous feeling. At this moment, Li Mu recalled the first time he met Tianjizi. Without a doubt, this skeletal old man was an 8th-level powerhouse. His identity was on the verge of being revealed. The demonic path's 3rd patriarch, Yu Quan. Yuan Luo looked at Li Mu and smiled wickedly. Do you think you're the only one who knows how to teleport? Before he could finish his sentence, Li Mu's figure had already faded and disappeared on the spot. If it was only Yuan Luo, he could still deal with him. The demonic path's 3rd patriarch, Yu Quan, was a true 8th-level powerhouse. Even if Li Mu shot an arrow with all his strength, he would not be his match. The gap between the 6th level and the 7th level could be crossed with the help of the sun-shooting bow. However, when he encountered the 8th level Yu Quan, the 7th level, he had no other choice but to run. After using spatial contraction once, he flew towards the east at full speed. As long as he reached the West Sea, he would be like a dragon entering the water. Even Yu Quan would not be able to catch up to him. However, Li Mu soon felt a powerful aura rapidly approaching from behind. Although the demonic path's 3rd patriarch was not as fast as spatial contraction, he was still much faster than Li Mu at full speed. He quickly caught up. However, when the distance between the two was close to 10,000 feet, Li Mu took a step forward and disappeared again. Yu Quan chased after him unhurriedly without any expression on his face. It was as if Li Mu was already in his hands. Hundreds of miles ahead, Li Mu continued to run for his life. After using spatial contraction twice, the magic power in his body was almost depleted. He could only fly while reciting incantations and using spiritual jades to replenish his magic power. He did not expect to meet the demonic path's 2nd patriarch in the Gathering Cave continent, nor did he expect there to be a long-distance teleportation formation that connected to the Ghost Island. They did not hesitate to spend a huge amount of spiritual jades to teleport Yu Quan over. They used the method that Li Mu had invented on Li Mu. At present, Li Mu was still unable to contend against such an expert without risking his life. Even if he and Yu Quan fought with their lives on the line and both sides were heavily injured, there was still Yuan Luo by his side. At that time, Li Mu would definitely be an arrow at the end of its flight and would definitely not be a match for Yuan Luo at his peak. No matter what, leaving that place was definitely the best choice. He used all of his magic power to increase his speed. In front of him he could already see a blue sea. In 2 more breaths of time, Li Mu would be able to enter the Western Sea. At that time, even the 3 ancestors of the demonic path would be powerless. However, when he was only a short distance away from the sea, a black lotus suddenly appeared on the shore in front of him. The evil Tao's third ancestor Yu Quan stood on the black lotus and calmly stared at Li Mu. Since Tianjizi is not here, where else can you run to today? With his path blocked, Li Mu did not panic. Instead he gradually calmed down. Yu Quan's words raised doubts in his heart. He looked at Yu Quan and asked, "What Tianjizi?" Yu Quan looked at Li Mu indifferently and said, "If it wasn't for Tianjizi stopping me time and time again, do you think you would still be alive today?" Li Mu was shocked. He had no idea what Yu Quan was talking about. He only knew that the evil Tao's third ancestor was an expert of the 8th level who could lead the demonic path to sweep through many sects on the Zhu continent. However, he had always been holed up in the South Sea Ghost Island and would not easily set foot on the Zhu continent because of a certain reason. He did not know that it was Tianjizi who had always been stopping Yu Quan. According to Yu Quan, he once wanted to personally attack Li Mu but was stopped by Tianjizi. What was Tianjizi's purpose for doing so? What was certain was that at that time, Li Mu and Xuanzong were like fire and water. Xuanzong's decision to cover for Qingqingzi was also made by Tianjizi. Why did he want to protect Li Mu? In the past 2 years, Xuanzong had suffered countless losses at the hands of Li Mu and had long lost his position as the #1 sect of the righteous Tao. Not long ago he led a group of experts to attack Xuanzong. Right now, it was not important to figure out the reason for all this. What was important was how to escape from Yu Quan. The West Sea was not far ahead, but with Yu Quan blocking the way, this seemingly short distance was impossible to cross. At such a distance, Li Mu did not even have time to use Earth Shrink. The flames in Yu Quan's eyes kept flickering as he looked at Li Mu, trying to see if there was any panic or despair on his face. However, the result was somewhat disappointing. Li Mu's expression was indifferent, and no emotions could be seen. The flames in his eyes flickered as he asked, "You're not afraid?" Li Mu asked back, "Why should I be afraid?" Yu Quan's face revealed a strange expression as he said, "You still have a trump card. I'm very curious, where does your confidence come from? Is it Ao Xian's Sun Shooting Bow?" The Sun Shooting Bow was one of Li Mu's greatest trump cards. During Ao Xian's era, many 8th level experts had fallen under the Sun Shooting Bow. This bow was completely capable of killing Yu Quan. However, the premise was that Li Mu had Ao Xian's cultivation at that time. With his current cultivation he could not kill or even seriously injure Yu Quan with the Sun Shooting Bow. However, his ultimate trump card had never been the Sun Shooting Bow. It was just that Li Mu would not use that trump card unless he was truly in a desperate situation. The stronger his magic power, the greater the backlash from using that trump card. When Li Mu was in the lower and middle realms he could still barely withstand it. However, now that his cultivation had reached the 7th level, the terrifying backlash was enough to destroy Li Mu's body and soul on the spot. When he tried to let the Empress possess him, even the Empress was frightened. The Empress's cultivation at that time was about the same as Li Mu's now. Finally, Yu Quan seemed to have run out of patience and said, "Hand over the heavenly book and join the sage sect. Then we can let bygones be bygones. Tianjizi is not here, so you won't be as lucky as before." "Oh, how did you know that I'm not here today?" Just as Yu Quan's voice fell, an old voice suddenly came from the shore behind him. This voice sounded familiar to Li Mu, and in Yu Quan's heart, it was unforgettable. He suddenly turned his head and looked at a reef by the sea. On one of the reefs an old man was sitting cross-legged. The old man's back was facing Li Mu and Yu Quan, and he was holding a fishing rod in his hand. It was unknown how long he had been sitting there. Li Mu's attention was all on Yu Quan just now, so he did not notice that place. Now that he thought about it, he was shocked to find that the old man seemed to have been fishing there before he fled here. Looking at the fish basket next to him, there were already dozens of small fish in it. Based on the speed of ordinary people's fishing, it was not difficult to see that he had been here before Li Mu came to the Jianghu continent. He knew that he would come to the Jianghu continent before Li Mu and knew that he would be hunted down by Yu Quan, so he came here in advance to wait for him. Was this the strongest person in Xuanzong? The old man put down the fishing rod and released all the fish in the basket into the sea. Then he turned around, revealing a face that Li Mu was no stranger to. This face was full of wrinkles and brown spots, and there were only a few strands of hair on his head. He was so old that he looked like he would step into a grave the next moment. But the appearance of such an old man made Yu Quan's face turn solemn, then angry. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, "Old ghost Tianjizi, don't tell me you don't have your own matters to attend to?" Tianjizi smiled and said, "This old man is just an idle person who should have died long ago. How could I have my own matters to attend to? I just got tired of fishing in the East Sea, so I came to the West Sea to fish." What, do you want to care about this? Although Tianjizi said so, who would travel tens of thousands of miles from the East Sea to the West Sea just to fish? Yu Quan's face was gloomy and terrifying as he asked, Tianjizi, this man has a grudge against your Xuanzong for humiliating your sect. Chapter 644. The situation at the West Sea was in a stalemate. Even though Yu Quan and Yuan Luo had the advantage in numbers, Li Mu and Tianjizi were not to be trifled with. The existence of the sun-shooting bow in particular made Yu Quan and Yuan Luo wary. The sun-shooting bow's power was limited in Li Mu's hands. However, if it was controlled by Tianjizi, even Yu Quan would not dare to take it head-on. There was a 90% chance that he would die on the spot if Tianjizi used all his strength. If that arrow was shot at Yuan Luo, who had yet to advance, would definitely die. 10,000 years ago they had dozens of senior and junior brothers. Now there were only 4 of them left. The death of any one of them was something they could not accept. The two sides faced each other from a distance, and the surroundings were deathly silent. After a while, Tianjizi spoke first. He looked at Yu Quan and Yuan Luo and said, "The fish in the West Sea are too small. It's boring to fish. If there's nothing else, we'll go back first." Yu Quan and Yuan Luo did not speak. Tianjizi looked at Li Mu with a smile and said, "Little friend Li Mu, let's go." After saying that, he turned and flew to the east. Li Mu glanced at the demonic path crowd and followed behind Tianjizi, leaving together with him. Beside Yuan Luo, a black-clothed man asked in confusion, "Sirs, are we just going to let them go?" Yuan Luo and Yu Quan ignored him. They knew very well that the moment Tianjizi appeared, they would not be able to do anything to Li Mu today. As one of the most difficult enemies of the sage sect in the past 10,000 years, Tianjizi's reputation was not undeserved. Yu Quan spat out a mouthful of turbid air and said, "There's no need to rush to deal with Tianjizi. Senior brother Xian Tian has already returned to Ghost Island. When he finishes his seclusion, Tianjizi will no longer be a threat. Senior brother Yuan Luo, come back with me." Yuan Luo nodded and ordered the people behind him, "Gather all the elders above the 6th realm and return to the South Sea with me. The day I come out of seclusion will be the day I sweep through the 10 continents. At this time, above the West Sea." Li Mu looked at Tianjizi's hunched back and asked, "Why did you save me?" Tianjizi smiled and said, "This old man already said that I only came to the Western Sea to fish and happened to run into you. Moreover, do you really need this old man to save you? Even if I don't do anything, the victor between you and Nether Spring is still between 40% and 60%. I'm afraid even Nether Spring himself doesn't know about this." Li Mu's pupils shrank. Tianjizi's divination skills were more powerful than he had imagined. Not only was he able to predict Li Mu's movements and the dangers he was about to encounter, he was even able to predict the outcome of the battle between him and Yu Quan. What else did he not know? Li Mu pondered for a moment and asked, "Senior Tianjizi, there's no need to show off your divination skills. Junior wants to know why you saved me again and again." Tianjizi was silent for a while before he turned to look at him and said, "In the future, the 10 continents can exist without me, but it can't exist without you." Li Mu knew that Tianjizi must have predicted something, so he asked, "Why?" Tianjizi shook his head and said, "This old man only predicted that the catastrophe of the 10 continents would come, and you are the only hope of the 10 continents. Anyone can die in the 10 continents, but you can't." Li Mu pondered again and asked, "When did you predict this?" Tianjizi said, "From the first time you stepped into Xuanzong." Li Mu was stunned for a moment, then he said angrily, "Then why did you allow Dao Qingzi to cover for Qing Qingzi and deliberately let Xuanzong become enemies with Fulu School?" Li Mu didn't understand. Since Tianjizi had already predicted this, why didn't he tell him directly? Instead, he let him and Xuanzong become enemies. In 2 years, Xuanzong was reduced to such a state. What was he planning? Tianjizi looked at Li Mu and asked, "If Xuanzong had handed over Qing Qingzi, little friend Li Mu, what would you have done in these 2 years?" Li Mu blurted out, "I." Just as he said this word, Li Mu froze in place. He didn't know how to answer Tianjizi's question for a moment. Of course, Tianjizi knew himself well. If Xuanzong had handed over Qing Qingzi, Xiaobai would have been avenged, and the knot in her heart would have been untied. Perhaps she would have taken the initiative to give herself to him 2 years ago. In the beginning, Li Mu would have fallen into the gentle embrace of the little fox. Without the goal of avenging her, Li Mu naturally wouldn't have joined forces with the 5 Taoist sects. Perhaps to this day he would still be Fulu School's hands-off manager. He wouldn't have cultivated desperately, thought of ways to improve the strength of the sect, and joined forces with the forces that could be joined. He would have had enough time to talk about love with the Empress. Their relationship would have been one step closer than it was now, or even 2 or 3 steps closer. He would often wander around the divine capital, the demon nation, and Mount Baiyun. Where would he find the time to cultivate? Immersed in the gentle embrace for 2 years, let alone transcend, he probably wouldn't even have the motivation to break through Dongxian. Li Mu looked at Tianjizi in shock and asked, "This is your goal?" Tianjizi asked, "What else could it be? Other than hatred, what else could make you do all this today?" Li Mu thought about it and realized that there really wasn't anything. Xiao Bai was Li Mu's darling. Li Mu didn't want her to suffer any grievances, let alone the hatred of the extermination of his clan. If Tianjizi had told him that the catastrophe of the 10 continents was coming and he was the only savior, Li Mu would most likely have thought that he had dementia. To think that he had even calculated this. This old fellow really knew him well. Li Mu's face turned red and he felt extremely awkward. He immediately changed the topic and said, "What catastrophe are you talking about? Is it the rise of the demon path?" Tianjizi shook his head and said, "I can only see a trace of the heavenly secrets. I can't see the specifics." In recent days, millions of people had died in Yanzhou and Jianghu continent. Corpses were everywhere and the people were in a terrible situation. This was already considered the catastrophe of the 10 continents. If Yuan Luo and the demon path's first ancestor used this opportunity to advance, how could the righteous path's only Tianjizi, who was at the 8th level, contend against them? At that time, the 10 continents would completely fall into the hands of the demon path. This matter corresponded to the catastrophe that Tianjizi had predicted. Li Mu heaved a long sigh of relief and continued to ask, "What should I do?" Tianjizi shook his head and said, "I don't know. You have to ask yourself about this matter." Li Mu didn't know what he should do at this moment. He had already done what he could. Combining all the forces that could be combined to resist the demon path was all he could do. However, this still didn't change the fact that the demon path was about to have 3 8th-level cultivators. Among the demon path's 3rd ancestor, Tianjizi could deal with one, and Li Mu could barely stop the other. However, what about the last one? After advancing to the 8th level, one would be able to expand one's domain. Those with lower cultivation than him would not be able to mobilize the power of heaven and earth within a certain range. 4 cultivators, if they couldn't mobilize the power of heaven and earth, they could only use about 50% of their full strength. Even if 10 people joined forces, they might not be a match for the last 8th-level demon path's first ancestor. Of course, if dozens of people ganged up on him and didn't borrow the power of heaven and earth, they would be able to fight against the 8th-level demon path's first ancestor with just their own magic power. They might even be able to kill the 8th-level demon path's first ancestor. However, at least half of the dozens of people ganging up on him would be killed. This was something that Li Mu absolutely could not accept. Moreover, the demon path didn't only have the 3rd ancestor. The number of 7th-level cultivators in the 3 great altars added together might not be as many as Li Mu's alliance, but it wouldn't be much less. If everyone joined forces to deal with Yu Quan, who would deal with the demon path's first ancestor? Li Mu could also give the sun-shooting bow to Tianjizi.